No names, no laughter, no silver or gold. No coming back after, no tales untold. The rhyme that every kid west of the river knows by heart. The riddle that passes and whispers across the playgrounds, and nervous giggles by the shadows of the high school lockers, and the rules that form the basis for all the best drinking games at the nights in the local college. They are the rules one had to know when in pursuit of Cave Boy. The rain is light, but the wind is fierce, and it drags these spraying bitter streaks across my face. I squinted, hood pulled tight, my fingers clenching and unclenching in search of warmth. We have gathered at the hole, the 7 of us, and we talk quietly amongst ourselves, amiably, anxiously, as 2 unravels the ladder and starts to lower it down. No names. Rule number 1. If we were going to do this, we decided that we were going to do it properly, so no names. We've all known each other for years, but for this evening's excursion, we've numbered up. I'm number 3. Down we'll go, down into the hole, and we'll debunk the myth of Cave Boy, or return home heroes with proof of his existence, once and for all. The hole itself is narrow and dark, can't be more than 2 feet in diameter, situated not half a mile from the edge of the cliff. It's the only natural feature around, and it's a claustrophobic's worst nightmare. There are no trees up here, no bushes, no streams or even large rocks. Just the howling of the wind, the wild grass, and this hole in the ground. Down it goes, down, down, down into the darkness below. You probably think that we're mad for what we're about to do, but this was not some improvised, off-the-cuff decision made in the aftermath of a few beers. We've been planning this for months. The idea snowballed. We're adventurers, and now the hypothetical has become real. And here we stand around the edge, as 2 quietly starts to lower the ladder down into the dark. My girlfriend draws close to me and squeezes my arm. I look at her and smile. Such beautiful brown eyes, such soft skin. She's incredible. I think that I love her. I've never loved anything else before, so I can't be certain though, but I don't know what else it is, if not love. She's number 4. I can't hear him over the howl of the wind, but by the way that he's standing, the grin on his face, the casual touching of the arm. 5 looks to be flirting with his 6 and 7, and shamelessly so. The girls giggle as he gestures to the hole, makes some joke about it presumably. I grin. The levity of the moment is welcome, and while my own regrets about agreeing to this excursion are rising now with real force as I look by my feet into the dark, narrow little tunnel down into the earth, I'm not a coward. I won't be the one to speak up. A voice rich with confidence, false or otherwise, rises over the gale. Do we have all the equipment then, gang? Cameras, LEDs, gloves, flashlights, the flare. Gang. I suppress a laugh. Did he call us gang? What the hell, man? We're not Mystery Incorporated. Our esteemed leader looks us over. He puts his hands together briefly and then pushes his wet blonde hair from his eyes. Number 1, he put this entire operation together. He's the one that got us all on board. We'll be legends, he had said with passion. The new legends. Forget about Colin McCreed. We'll be the ones that they'll tell all the stories about going forward. Colin McCreed was the original hero. Local legend told that he had gone down himself into the hole, alone. He had gone in search of Cave Boy. 20 or so years ago now, so the original stories had become distinctly distorted, but the rumors told of how he had first moved here for college. This was unusual enough in and of itself, since most people here just wanted to leave, but he had discovered the rules supposedly etched into the walls of Cave Boy's home. He had shared the secrets that he had found, spun tale after captivating tale, enjoyed the fruits of the mystery that he peddled, and then promptly disappeared. He ditched town in pursuit of more exciting ventures, not before allegedly knocking up a couple of the local girls on his way out though. What a guy. An asshole, but a legend nonetheless. Our expedition tonight falls under his shadow. Number 1 peers down into the hole, runs a hand across his lower jaw and stands tall, looking us over one at a time. We make history tonight, guys and gals, he says. And remember the rules of the rhyme. If we're to presume that Colin McCree didn't just pull them out of his ass all those years ago, then they hold real weight. Don't take them for granted. He recites them somberly, in a voice that's commanding and clear, as thunder rolls across the evening's gray sky in the distance. No names, no laughter, no silver or gold, no coming back after, no tales untold. A shiver runs up my spine, and to feel my girlfriend squeeze me just a little tighter. She's a brave girl, braver than me, I would say honestly, but we all need the comfort of another every now and then. He goes on. Perhaps, he says, now would be the opportune time for me to say just a few. Oh, just get on with it, you preppy asshole. I mutter to my girlfriend and she snorts, but thanks to a sudden and unwelcome drop in the wind, I think that one hears me too. He pauses and looks at me, eyebrow raised, and I wink at him. He smirks and shakes his head. On second thought, let's just get this thing into motion, he says good-naturedly. He looks down at 2 crouched by the entrance to the hole, fixing the ladder in place, and he gives our leader a little salute. So, once we're down there officially, no names. 1 reiterates as he checks and double-checks his belt. My boy 5 helps 7 finish packing and tightening the group's communal backpack, and together the 2 of them strap it to a length of rope and start to lower it down into the dark. Most of our supplies are inside. No laughter, keep the giggles to yourself. I think that we're okay for silver and gold, unless there are any secret prospectors in the group. I stifle a chuckle of my own. The final 2 rules, we're not sure what they mean, of course. No one is, but this is our only planned excursion as a group. I doubt that we'll ever do this again, and I hope that I speak for all of us when I say that I feel that we know each other as well as any members of any group can. I trust you people implicitly. There shouldn't be any tales untold between us. He smiles and opens his hands in a gesture of faith, stepping forward, and with a hand from number 2, he clambers onto the ladder. With a clenched jaw, he begins his descent. I watch the top of his wet blonde head vanish into the darkness, and the gravity of the moment and our mission hits me like a punch to the stomach. I suppress a wave of cold panic as the wind roars in my ears. I make eye contact with 5 as he chews the side of his cheek. He grimaces at me and I return the expression. 6 holds her flashlight above the entrance to the hole, providing in theory a guiding light for number 1, but I'm not sure how much good it's doing in all honesty. She pushes her glasses up her nose with her forefinger as 5 clambers awkwardly onto the rope ladder. He's looking away from me up at 7, but something either in his expression or in some unheard words makes her blow him a kiss. What an ass, I think to myself with a grin as he disappears down. Here, 6, I'll do that. It's okay, you go on down, my girlfriend says, giving my hand a squeeze and walking around the edge of the hole to 6, holding out her hand for the flashlight. 6 passes it over and takes a deep breath, clambering onto the ladder and down into the hole. 7 follows with some reassuring words from 2 as she nervously ties up her hair and begins to cautiously climb down. Just 3 of us up here now, myself, my girlfriend with the flashlight, and number 2 at the ladder. He'll be staying up here, ensuring that the ladder remains strapped in place. He's a good guy if a little anxious. He volunteered to come down with us, but we all know that he would really rather not. So it was agreed in unspoken terms that he would remain up here. I reach out for his hand and he grabs it, squeezing and wishing me words of encouragement. Thanks, brother. Stay strong, I reply as I step carefully onto the ladder. 4 will follow me down. I take a deep breath and I lower myself in. The ground rises around me until the wind and the rain are no longer a force on my face, only a groan in the surface world above. I can feel myself shaking, teeth chattering as I lower myself down, rung by shaking rung. It's tight. My back presses up against the edge of the hole. My elbows bump and press up against these sides with discomfort. The earth is cold and dark and heavy all around. The sound of the wind above is replaced steadily by the sound of my own labored breathing, and I work to bring it under control as I descend. We'll be the legends, one had said, the new legends. And I allow these words to echo around my head, willing me down as I lower myself rung after rung. Down and down into the deep end, the dark of the unknown. The voices of my friends dance on my eardrums, and then they become clearer. I catch flashes of light from below my peripheral vision. I'm getting close, and when my back no longer presses against the tunnel's sides, when I can hear them clearly behind me, I jump down onto the ground with a grunt, grinning at the others as we whisper excitedly. I catch glimpses of their faces as they scan the beams of their lights across the walls. I reach for my belt, clicking my own flashlight on and taking my new surroundings. The supposed home of Cave Boy. The walls are thick, dark rock embedded in the earth. Narrow passageways and tunnels branch off in all directions. Around our feet is a modest pile of trash, cans, bottles mostly. They clink and clatter as we move about. My girlfriend jumps down from the ladder beside me and I wrap her up in a hug. Well done, number 4, I whisper. Back at you, 3, she whispers in return. Alright guys, 1 says softly, his voice distorted and echoed in these strange and narrow new surroundings. Grab your equipment from the backpack. I'll take the first shift with it once we're all good. Then I think it's best if we can... If you say split up and search for clues, 1, I might just have to punch you, says 5. I have to stifle another laugh and I hear a snort from number 7. 1 isn't happy, however. You know the rules as well as I do, man. Don't mess around, no laughter. And I tell you what, 5, you can take first shift with the backpack. 5 says nothing in response, but he nods, raising his eyebrows at me once 1 has pushed the bag into his chest and turned away. I smirk back, and we press on as a group down one of the tunnels, but not before my girlfriend has placed a bright red LED light at the ladder's base, the first in a trail of breadcrumbs back, so to speak, a little more substantial than breadcrumbs though, we hope. The tunnel is cold, frighteningly cold, and rocks stick out into the passage at dangerous and unusual angles. 6 is snapping photos with her phone every minute or so, and the flash temporarily lights up great sections of the walls at once, casting curious shadows out over the uneven surface. On we walk in almost total silence for another 10 or so minutes. We are faced with the choice of a couple of offshoot tunnels in this period, and each time we make a choice we put down one of the LED lights. One seems to be leading us through the tunnels that go down, the ones that decline and carry us lower into the complex. I'm on edge. My heart is pounding, but it's exciting. My anxiety at the entrance to the hole has given way to a more general sense of anticipation. I may be scared, but I'm not, fearful, I guess. Like being on a roller coaster. This place is cool, creepy, sure, but it's only tunnels under the ground. Just tunnels, I tell myself. But my anxiety makes a return once we enter into the cavern. It's large, wide, colossal in fact. The tunnel gives way and I hear little gasps of amazement from the team as they send their beams of light out across the rock and into the distance. Great stalactites hang down from the ceiling and strange sharp formations cover the ground. All around us, woven into rock and the stone and the earth, are long, thin, strange mushrooms, like a creeping fungus, glowing ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly in a shade of pale blue. And up ahead is a huge, flat slab of stone. It's monstrous in size and carved into it, faded over time but still quite clear indeed, are the words to the rhyme. The rules. No names, no laughter, no silver or gold. No coming back after, no tales untold. Shit. Somebody speaks. I realize after a moment that it was me. 6 snaps a picture. Incredible, mutters 1. Just incredible, isn't it? I mean, look, just look at it. My God, says 5, taking a step closer, placing his hand onto the rock. If he stretches, he can touch the letters on the bottom line. So there's truth to the stories. There's truth to the legend. CM. Colin McCreed. He must have. His words catch in his throat. Fear, emotion, I can't tell. It doesn't matter. I feel what he's feeling, we all do. And carved below it off to the right is something else. In a shaking hand, I turn the beam of my flashlight towards it. Cave boy welcomes you. He watches. 5 murmurs it out loud. 7 starts to whimper, but 1 can't stop grinning. The grin looks maniacal in the shadows cast by the flashlights. He lifts the camera around his neck and takes some pictures of his own. I knew it, he says over and over. You see, I knew that there had to be something down here. We're going to find him, guys. We're going to find Cave Boy. He watches 1. I say out loud, stepping forward and gesturing to the hastily carved inscription towards the bottom. This doesn't concern you at all. 1 doesn't even seem to be listening. It's like a movie or we're in a novel or something. He mutters gleefully, snapping picture after picture. 7 speaks up. Maybe we should go back, you guys, she says in a wavering voice. 1 turns to her. Go back? You're kidding, right? We can't go back. We go onwards, through the cavern. We agreed to do this as a team. A one and all for nothing type of deal. Come on, let's go on a little bit further. 6 squeezes 7's arm. It's all right, girl, she says. Aren't you excited? Come on, we'll be okay. And so we shrug and we exchange glances and we all follow 1 down deeper into the cavern. My girlfriend traces her fingers along the stems of one of the faintly glowing blue mushrooms, the fungus in the rock. Hey, I hiss to her, don't touch that. You don't know what it is. She pushes me playfully and rolls her eyes. Deeper we go, and deeper into a lightless tunnel set into the side of the cavern. Our footsteps loud against the damp stone beneath, our breath fog-like in the chilled air. The walls narrow further until we arrive in what seems to be a small room of sorts. The mushrooms are thicker in here, and in the ground below is another dark hole. Rectangular though, this one, and wider. What looks to be a loosely carved set of stone steps descend down to the world below. Oh hell, mutters my girlfriend as we all take in these stairs of stone. What do you think they are? Asks number 5. I mean, they look kind of rough, but these steps, they're too accurate to be a coincidence, right? They were carved, they must have been, 6 said. She brushes her hair behind her ear. But they look old, eroded. They must have been here for some time, I mean. It's not like there's much down here to erode them, you know. We have to go down, you know that right, guys, we have to see. 1 says, already making his way below. Careful step after step, ducking to avoid the edge of the rectangle as he lowers himself inside. Screw it, says number 7, trembling, but holding her composure as she begins her own descent. If we don't go all the way now, then he's just going to make us come back, right? She says with a nervous giggle. Arms burst out of the darkness below. A shadow grabs 7 by the shoulders and she slips on the stone. 4 lets out a shriek and we all take a step backwards. 5 swearing violently as he swings the beam of his flashlight onto the assailant. But it's only 1. Did you just laugh? He hisses. Panic writ across his face, and I feel it too. I hadn't realized until now just how much I had been relying on one sense of confidence to keep maintenance over my own mood. I don't. 7 replies awkwardly. 1 looks wildly over the faces of the group. I couldn't hear. Did she laugh? Was it a laugh? I look at my girlfriend. She speaks up. It wasn't. I don't think it really was a... No. 6 cuts in, shooting her a glance. No, she didn't laugh, 1. You misheard. Come on, let's keep going. 1 takes this in and releases 7's shoulders. He pushes his blonde fringe from his eyes and squeezes her on the arm. Sorry, he says. I'm sorry. He rubs his forehead and turns, heading back down into the tunnel below. 7 smiles nervously at 6, shaken, and follows him. My girlfriend does the same, but before I can descend too, 5 stops me and gestures behind. What is it? I ask. Just take a look, bro. I turn and he lights up an area of rock above and behind me. My teeth are set on edge as I take it in. It's a drawing in what looks like some kind of white chalk. There is a human face, a man's, disturbingly intricate. Chalk stems and fungi grow through holes in his skin, into the ducts of his eyes, mushrooms sprouting from his mouth. The drawing's edges seem to blend and merge with the real mushrooms, ending at spots in the wall where the curious blue fungus grows out from. I jump as I feel 5's hand on my shoulder. I'm really hoping that this stuff was left by a bunch of pranksters, a group that came before us, you know. Yeah, I mutter back. Maybe you know who did all of this. CM, to keep his legend going. Yeah, 5 says quietly. Maybe. We descend. I shoot one last look at the drawing before I do so. It's horrific. The steps lead into another little chamber of sorts, and the way forwards and deeper into the cave is through a low, tight passage, nowhere near big enough to stand up in. You would have to crawl to get through. There's nobody in the chamber with 5 and I, so I can only assume that they've already done just that and pressed ahead. I squat down and shine my flashlight into the tunnel, and I can see someone's legs crawling away. I run a hand over my face and the 2 of us exchange another look, but we say no more. Down we get to our hands and knees and we crawl through the little tunnel. The rock below is cold and painful. It takes a good 3 or 4 minutes to get all the way through, and on the other side, the cavern branches off again at all sorts of strange angles. Some tunnels go across, some down, and some are above our heads, impossible to reach. The walls of these caves are covered, absolutely covered, in the same styled white chalk drawings. This is incredible, says 6, taking snapshot after snapshot. Just look at all this. The drawings here are more intricate than the face at the top of the stairs, but they are made with the same substance, and many are lost under the glowing blue fungus that grows between the cracks. Looking up and all around the drawings, I see cover the ceilings as well as the walls, and a strange and sickening sense of sudden vertigo overcomes me. I stumble to a nearby rock and I lean against it, closing my eyes and breathing deep and gathering myself. I can hear my girlfriend chattering excitedly to number 7. I grimace and take another look around. The drawings are beautiful, in their own twisted way. Most are of the mushrooms with long stems, intertwined with each other in strange but careful patterns as they dance across the dark walls. Some are of men. Most of the drawings of these figures are small and difficult to spot amongst the fungus sketchings, but some are much larger, life-size perhaps. One such drawing shows the man sitting sadly atop a rock, his head in his hands. The drawing, unlike the others, looks rushed, hasty. It gives the uneasy impression that the man is trembling. Cave Boy. I spot the name scrawled amidst the drawings, difficult at first glance to tell apart from the loops and twines of these stems of the chalk fungi. Hey, I say. Hey Six, get a picture of this, would you? She steps so close to me and brushes her hair behind her ear. The beam of a stray flashlight rushes past and reflects for a moment off of her earring as she lifts her phone to take the shot. A gasp of horror escapes from my lips and I take a step back. What the? Oh God. She looks at me startled. What is it? Your earrings. Six, your earrings, they're still in, aren't they? What are they made of? Aren't they gold? No names, no laughter, no silver or gold, no coming back after, no tales untold. The horror of realization passes across her face. She reaches up to her ears. Oh crap, you're right. Does this count? I mean, does jewelry count? The other members of the group are silent now, looking at her, and her voice gets a little more frantic. Does jewelry count? She asks again, desperately. A noise off in the distance to my left catches my attention. I turn and peer around a corner, shining my flashlight down the length of the long tunnel. I catch a glimpse of Juan examining something on the wall before he disappears out of sight. Juan, I call down to him. Get back here, man, we have an issue. What are you talking about? Juan replies from behind me. Terrible goosebumps ripple across my skin. I turn around to face him slowly. It's him, all right, staring at me with his head cocked. I know we've got an issue. Who are you calling at? I slam my teeth together and swing the flashlight back around as quick as I can, pointing it into the tunnel. But whatever the light had found down there in the darkness has gone. I had seen something, I could have sworn it. I had seen something or someone at the end of the tunnel. I had assumed that it was one, but now that the certainty of this notion had vanished, the memory began to warp and change and shift in my mind. I find myself unable to hold on to what it was that I had seen, if indeed I had seen anything at all. A man, surely, a figure at least, pale. Oh God. Guys, we need to leave, I say. I'm not messing around here, we need to get out, and we need to get out right now. One nods and runs a hand across his lower jaw. I'm inclined to agree, he says gravely. Six, your earrings, are they solid gold? Is it even real gold at all? Not about the earrings, man, I say, grabbing a hold of Juan's jacket. There's something in the tunnels. I thought it was you just now. There's someone else down here. The group begins to look at each other, uncertainty rising, but one just stares back at me. You sure, Three? You absolutely sure? He whispers. I swear it. I say back, sweat beginning to bud and streak down my back. We gotta get out, man. Where? One replies. Down here. Yeah, down there. Cave boy, one whispers, and before I can stop him, he has pushed past me, striding down the tunnel, his flashlight raised high. Wait, Jared, but I bite my tongue. Juan, come back. But he does not, and so, like a fool, I chase after him. I tell the others to wait and I sprint on behind. My girlfriend ignores me, of course, and follows down too. As we approach, I can hear him talking, muttering to himself like a madman. I knew it, he keeps saying. Cave boy, I'm going to be the new CM. I'll be famous. Proof. Cave boy. He calls out into the tunnel like a lunatic. Cave boy, I know that you're here, man. What are you doing? I shout at him, grabbing him by the shoulders and slamming him up against the rock. We have to go now. But he shoves me off. He ignores my girlfriend's protests and pushes past her when she tries to stand in his way, and carries on into one of the offshoot tunnels. I didn't think that it went so deep, he muttered. I thought that it was only dead ends. Just dead ends and false promises. My blood runs cold. I run up to him and stop him for a second time. What do you mean you thought it was only dead ends? Number one, we haven't found any dead ends. No, he replies, not today we haven't, but the other tunnels all lead to dead ends. I can hear my heartbeat loud in my ears. How do you know that? I hiss. How could you possibly know? How do you think we found the cavern with the inscription so quickly, 3? I say nothing, but my chest rises and falls in panic. My girlfriend speaks. 1, have you been down here before? He smiles guiltily. Yes, he says quietly. Once, just once. I scoped the hole out a little. 2 helped me out. He came down with me. I didn't want it to be dangerous. For you guys, for the team. I didn't want us getting lost. We made it as far as the inscription and then came back. I wanted you guys to see what I saw. So you've been down here before then? I ask, angrily shaking him. You're a hypocrite. No coming back after, that's one of the rules. No, 1 says, pushing me off again. After means after finding Cave Boy. I'm sure of it. How can you possibly be sure of that? You're insane. Enough of this man, we have to go. I grab him by the jacket and try to pull him back the way that we came. This is it, my last chance. If he's not going to comply, then I'm leaving the idiot behind. But I'm not sure which way that we came. Oh God, I don't know which way to go. The tunnels are many and they disappear off into the dark. He breaks free again and strides down one of the nearby corridors. Get your head in the game, he calls back to us. I promise you now, I'm going to find Cave Boy or... He swings his flashlight back round in front of him, and he stops in his tracks. My girlfriend and I are at the base of the tunnel watching in terror. Number 1 is halfway down it, maybe 20 to 25 feet ahead, and beyond him a little bit deeper down the tunnel is someone else. Pale like 1 but thinner, taller, even though it is stooped over, it still looms over him. Its limbs are skinnier and longer. Its rib cage is distended grotesquely. What I had perhaps mistaken for one's light gray jacket is nothing but skin, pulled tight across unnatural, outstretched, and broken bones. The creature's jaw hangs loose. Its eyes are 2 dark shadows. I can hear a low moaning. No, over and over again. Whether it's coming from me or from 4, I cannot tell. It takes all of my will not to scream at the abomination at the end of the tunnel. The moaning fades away and we stand there, us 4 in the dark of the tunnels, in silence. Cave Boy. 1 whispers and takes a slow, cautious step backwards. The creature moves, slowly at first, and just its arm and its hand. They are the only things that move, and robotically so. The rest of it stays completely impossibly still, like a statue. The movement draws my eye and I see the long thin strands of the pale glowing fungus, connecting the creature's arm to the rock of the wall. As it moves, the fungus retreats, into his skin and into the rock, and new strands and stems push through to meet in the spot that he moves to. It's hard to explain, and it's harder still to comprehend. I hear 1 let out a whimper of distress as the creature's long arm reaches slowly out and its spindly fingers tap against his head. Cave Boy is surely it can be none other, takes a slow step forward. The mushroom vines connecting his legs to the walls around retract, and new bonds form. The fungus shoots out from the rock and connects with the stems that grow out from the skin, like glowing wires, before his bare and pale foot has even touched the ground. The creature keeps tapping its fingers against one's head, each finger slowly tapping one after the other. Guys, 1 calls back to us as quietly as he can, taking another retreating step. And Cave Boy descends. The dark pits of his animal eyes, voids in that pale face, flash a bright and terrible blue as he violently sinks his teeth into one's neck, shaking him mercilessly, tearing him apart. "No!" I scream, but it is already too late. Dark blood gushes over one's writhing body and loudly onto the floor, splattering up the walls as Cave Boy throws him around like a doll, tearing pieces off him wildly and furiously, eventually slamming his corpse against the ground to crack him open. I stagger against the wall and convulse, vomit rising up into my throat, and I expel it across the floor. I don't catch what my girlfriend says to me, but she's dragging me now, dragging me back through the tunnels. She's calling out for the team, and there's a voice in response. A girl's voice. It sounds like sex. "This way," she mutters. "This way, we're gonna be okay, we're gonna be alright." Though whether she's speaking to me or to herself, I cannot say. And there, the voices are getting clearer now. I can hear them and I can see them. 5 is at the front, staring at me in alarm. "Guys," he says, "what the heck is? Go!" I roar into his face, grabbing him by the cuff, gesturing frantically to the low little tunnel. "Go, back to the ladder." The force in my voice is enough. I can see it, the sheer, unarguable certainty, the conviction, the fear, and so they go. 7, then 6, scrambling down onto all fours and crawling back through the tunnel. 5 shoots us a terrified look. "Cave Boy, he's real, 5. He's real," my girlfriend says, her voice strained. "Where is 1 at?" 5 asks, looking between the two of us. "Guys, where is he?" A low and wet, guttural moan echoes down through the tunnels, and we turn as one to stare back into the shadows. "Just go, man, please. Please go," I say again, and he swears but relents, crawling into the tunnel. I gesture my girlfriend through first, and then I swivel around at the approaching rumbling, casting my light down into the tunnel. It lands into the far end on Cave Boy, face and torso a deep scarlet. He stares at me and then he wails, screaming as he jerks suddenly forward, slamming carelessly against the walls of rock, careening towards me out of the darkness. I turn and crash down to my knees and begin scrabbling madly into the tunnel, through it, crawling as fast as I physically can. I don't have time to put away my flashlight, so with every movement of my hand, I'm bashing it against the rock. It takes a few hits and then it falters. A few more and it goes dark. Dead. I come up to my girlfriend's feet. "Move," I bellow. "You have to go faster. Go, go, go." She does so, and I can sense the ripple of panic that flows all the way up to the front of the procession, and all the way back down to me. I hear her crying, a deep howl at the tunnel's base. I feel vibrations along the rock, and I shoot a look back. It's difficult to see in the dark, but a pale and unnatural shape is forcing its way towards me in the gloom. I see it reach forwards. I feel scratching at the soles of my boots. "Faster!" I roar, shoving 4 forwards. "I can't," she replies desperately. "I can't." I kick back at the horror behind me in the darkness, fearful with each kick that something is going to wrap around my foot and drag me back into the darkness. It certainly tries. I'm on my back now, eyes wide as I scrabble backwards to the best of my ability, kicking at the pale shapes in the shadow as Cave Boy cries and screams. After what seems like a brutally long period of time, I gasp as I emerge backwards from the tunnel. 5 hoists me up to my feet, and together we run, catching up to the group, sprinting back through the tunnels, through the cavern with its stalactites and its formations of rock, and following the resilient glow of the red LEDs. "It's too big, right?" I pant my girlfriend. "It's way too big. It can't fit all the way through the tunnel, surely. I mean, there's no way. I don't know, she replies breathlessly back. Our feet kick up eventually against cans and broken bottles, and we stagger to a halt at the base of the ladder. Oh God, oh thank you, I say out loud, jumping forward onto the ladder, beginning my desperate ascent. This time, there's no way that I'm gonna be the last one in the row again. Yeah, forget that. But I do make sure that my girl is behind me. I look up, squinting. I can see our man too at the top, silhouetted against the gray and swirling sky above, his hair whipped about his head. The welcome noise of the wind grows louder. 2, we're coming up. But 2 does not reply. He only watches as I scramble up the ladder of rope towards him, and he smiles sadly, a smile that freezes the blood in my veins. No, he calls down softly, barely loud enough for me to hear. No, you're not. And then, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And he leans back, and using all his force, he tugs something out of the ground. The ladder swings to the side, and I smack into the wall with a crunch. I hear the others below me swear and cry out. 2, I call up. What are you doing? I'm sorry, James, he says to me, his voice soft, his face streaked with rain. But my father needs you. He's alone, you see. 2, I call up. I don't know what's happening, I can't comprehend. This is a guy that I've known for years. A friend. My friend. Please. But 2 shakes his head. And he's been alone for such a long time. Goodbye, James. Tell the others that I'm sorry. And then he grunts with exertion, pulling the ladder's final hook from the ground with all his might. And I watch him shoot upwards and away as the ladder falls and tumbles down the hole. My stomach lurches upwards as I cry out, as I drop, as we all drop, falling back down into the darkness below. I slam my back up against the walls of the hole, pressing my feet up against the side as I fall. It slows my descent, but not by enough to come to a stop. We tumble into a heap amongst the trash, 4 and 7 and I. 5 and 6 stare at us incredulously. 5 marches into the narrow shaft of gray light from above and shouts up to the top. What the heck? 2, what have you done? My girlfriend is hyperventilating. No, she mutters, standing and striding over to the dim circular beam of light, pushing 5 aside and calling up to the top as well. 2, please, why would you do this? I go to her, but she shoves me away and starts to sob. I run a hand over my head. 5 spins and looks at me, clenching his fists. What is this? 3, what has he done? Guys, what is going on? Somebody explain it to me, please. I suck in some dank cave air through my teeth, looking behind him down the rocky passage. No sign of the creature, but I don't know if it was able to make it all the way through the narrow tunnel. Cave boy is real, I say flatly. He's real and 1 is dead. It killed him. What? 6 steps forwards, shaking, looking from me to 4. You're kidding, right? Guys. But she can see the truth playing across our haunted faces. My girlfriend wipes her face and tries to bring her sobbing under control. I saw it, we both did. Guys, K-Boy is not a joke, I say. It's real, he's real. He's a monster of some kind, and he killed 1. He tore out his throat. My voice catches on the last word and I'm unable to speak on. I'm still processing. 7 begins to whimper. 5 crouches by the ground and starts rooting through the backpack. And 2, I don't know, he said something about his father, about how he needs us, and then he let the ladder down on purpose. Okay, enough. 7 wipes her nose and stands straight, shoulders squared, shaking, tears running down her face, staring right at me. She juts forward and I stumble back. This isn't funny, this is sick. James, just what do you think you're... Both 4 and I cry out at the mention of my name. 4 physically tries to put her hand over 7's mouth, but she pushes her off. What? Listen to me, 7, she says. Please, please listen. This is all real. We don't know what's going on, but this isn't a prank. I swear to you, I swear in my life. We have to obey the rules. We have to follow the rules or we have no hope, I'm sure of it. I remember then. The earrings, I say. 6, you need to take off your earrings right now. Take them off and throw them away. Shakily, she does so. We're all walking a tightrope here. I think everybody's in shock. No one quite knows what to do or how to react. I'm going back for Jeremy, 7 says quietly. That's his name, number 1, Jeremy. 7, come on. But she's already walking off down the tunnel. Calmly, eerily. She hasn't even got her flashlight switched on. 4 brings her up and onto her back as we call after her, but the light lands on something else beyond. He's there. Cave boy. Stock still, just like before, staring with those void black eyes, jaw hanging, neck cracking as like a robot. His head tilts suddenly to the side, looking down at 7 before him. And we all see him, every one of us, and he is no less horrific. More so really given the dark stains across his face and torso. A sudden flash of silver to my right causes me to look across and down to 5, crouched by the group's backpack, a metal flare gripped in his hands. The flare, but crap, there's only one. We only have the one. Wait, 5, I say desperately. There's just the one, we could. But there's no use finishing my sentence. The thought that had occurred to me then all of a sudden was to shoot the flare up through the hole. A rescue flare, hope that somebody sees and comes in search for us. That's presumably why he has it in his hand. But there is really only one thing to do with the flare now. Needs must when the devil drives. And 5 does not hesitate. He points the metal at the atrocity in the tunnel and slams it, firing it off. A bright red burst explodes from the end and whizzes through the air towards Cave Boy's chest. It punches into him and he staggers back, and we are forced to shield our eyes as, like a firework, it explodes more violently into a blaze of orange and red. I sprint forward, still shielding my eyes, ignoring the twisted howls and screeches, and grab 7 by the scruff of her collar, dragging her back to the group, and away we run down an opposite tunnel, one as of yet unexplored. We're sprinting, panicked, flashlight beams jumping all over, bumping and crashing into each other as Cave Boy screams behind. The orange and red glow fading as we round corner after corner through the caves. The bag. 5 mutters bitterly through grunts. I forgot the bag. Forget it, man, it's gone, it's okay. We'll be okay. I say back to him as we run, with 6 at the head leading the way, through passage after passage. She's doing the opposite to what one did. She's not choosing the paths that go down. She's opting for the ones that seem to keep us relatively level. But soon there's no choice, and so back down we go. We begin to tire, and stumbling around a corner, I pull the group together and whisper for everybody to turn off their flashlights. They do so, and we huddle together, waiting, tensed and braced, listening intently for noises and sounds that would indicate K-Boy's approach. We listen, but we hear nothing. Nothing but our ragged breathing in the dark of the caves. Our eyes begin to adjust to the low level of light provided by the glowing blue fungus, and the faces of my friends start to appear in form in the darkness, illuminated ever so subtly. We wait a little longer, and when it becomes clear that we are not being followed, we slump to a sit, resting our tired legs. 7 starts to cry again, her attempts to stifle her sobs admirable but poor. 1, she whimpers, and I put a hand out to my right and squeeze her shoulder. We can process this once we're out, when we're safe. For now, guys, we just gotta get the heck out of here. So how are we going to do that? 6 asked me, the lenses of her glasses reflecting the dim glow of the mushrooms. All right, I say, trying desperately to keep my voice calm. 6, you got any signal? She shakes her head. All right, how about this then? We keep going. This place is massive. It's entirely possible that there's another way in and out. We search for one, and if we can't find anything then we come back the way that we came, head back to the hole, and hope that cave boys disappeared and we try to climb up. Climb up, 5 replies. Are you insane? There's no way we can do that. I lick my teeth. It's not a great plan, I appreciate that. And how are we going to find our way back? 6 asks. The LEDs were in the backpack, and we didn't have all that many to begin with. I pause, but my girlfriend speaks up to my left, her face barely visible in the glow. The mushrooms. We'll use the mushrooms. Pull a whole bunch out of the wall and put them into piles. Movement catches my eye. 5 is shaking his head. They're not bright enough, it won't work. It will work, she retorts. If we have enough of them in each pile, we'll be able to see. It won't be as obvious as the LEDs, but we'll see them for sure if we're looking. 5 runs his hand over his jaw again, thinking, but 4 stands up before he can respond. She tugs a couple of handfuls of the fungus out of the wall and forms them into a pile in the middle of our little circle. And we become a little clearer, a little brighter. 5 nods. Okay, I'm in. Let's do this. 6 murmurs her agreement, but 7 remains silent. 7? I say softly. I don't like this, she whispers. I want to go home. I just want to go home. It's okay, we'll be okay, 6 tells her, and as a group we stand and we make a choice on a tunnel. Walking in a careful and cautious procession, our flashlights off. Our eyes are adjusting and we don't want to draw any more attention than is necessary. We try to make what we believe to be logical choices whenever we're faced with multiple tunnels. We pull mushrooms from the wall and create little glowing piles and press on. 7 has started to cry again softly. I reach out in front of me and squeeze her shoulder in the darkness. She thanks me quietly, squeezing my hand back in return. 4 is beyond her, with 5 currently leading the procession. And we walk for some time. The white outline of a sketch catches my eye through the gloom, small and crude. Like the first face, but this one looks like a man sat cross-legged, facing the opposite way. It's at the edge of a tunnel that we aren't following, so I decide, perhaps unwisely, not to bring it up. I wonder if any of the other members of the group saw it too. I turn to look behind me to count, to make sure that we're all still together. There's 7 and 6 at the back. Wait, 7? What's 7 doing behind me? I could have sworn that she was in front. I swear suddenly and swivel around, grabbing the shoulders of the girl in front of me and turning her to face me. She shrieks and the whole procession jumps, distressed. What the heck? She says to me, staring into my eyes. It's 4, it's my girlfriend. Have you been in front of me the whole time? I ask, my voice uneven. Yes, I have. Why? What's the matter? Were you crying earlier? Was I crying? Yes, crying. Were you crying? She furrows her eyebrows. The pale blue light reflects in her deep brown eyes. No, babe, I wasn't crying. A chill shivers through me and I swear again, running a hand over my face, feeling pinpricks of sweat form over my skin despite the clammy coldness. This place, this terrible place, I mutter, pushing past to the front of the group, leading us on. I'm losing it. I'm really starting to lose it. One of the tunnels seems to be ever so slightly brighter than the others. It could be my mind playing tricks on me, but it's worth a shot. We head towards it and the glow does get a little stronger, there's no doubt about it. But as we approach, it becomes clear that the source of the glow is a pile of mushrooms, exactly like the ones that we've been leaving as markers. In fact, it is one of our markers. It has to be. Oh, crap. I mutter as the others gather around. We've just come around in a circle. 3. 5 whispers urgently. He knocks my shoulder and points up to the wall of rock near the ceiling. There's something new. At least it's got to be new. I didn't see it the last time that we were here, and neither did anybody else. It's a drawing of us. The 5 of us, sat in a circle like we were when we came up with the plan. 2 guys, 3 girls surrounding a little chalk pile of the strange fungus. Oh no. 6 murmurs as the panic once again starts to rise. A groan warbles through the darkness of the caves around us, a faint wail that echoes across the walls. 7 starts to babble almost incoherently. No. I can make out through gibberish. I'm done. And I turn and see her scrabbling at her belt, and then there's a click and suddenly the chamber is flooded with light. No! Someone yells, but it's too late. We're all momentarily blinded as 7 swings around the beam of her flashlight, talking to herself in a rising tone, darting away from us to stop us from grabbing it off of her. Turn it off, my girlfriend hisses. Please, 7, just turn it off and be quiet. 7 stops and she falls silent, but she does not turn off the flashlight. She stands still, staring, and with gritted teeth I turn and allow my gaze to follow the beam of light. It lands on a drawing against the far wall. It looks new. It's a drawing of 7, her arms outstretched, her eyes closed. And it's her all right. The sketch is definitely her. She lifts the flashlight and the beam rises up towards the ceiling. And there up high it reveals a tunnel carved into the rock. And at the tunnel's mouth is Cave Boy, watching silently from above, smiling. 7 stutters, the hand holding the flashlight shakes violently. Please, she whimpers. Cave Boy is like a statue, such total reptilian stillness. He doesn't move a muscle, until he does. His eyes flash that bright and terrible blue and his hands fly out to either side, gripping tightly onto the rock and flinging himself down towards us, howling. Pale blue fungus shoots out from the cracks in the rock below to connect with his skin as he lands amongst us, grabbing a hold of 7's hair and pulling her roughly and suddenly towards one of the tunnels. She screams and drops her flashlight, and the little cavern comes alive with rapidly swinging, crisscrossing beams as we scramble to her defense, adrenaline surging as we grab her and try to pull her away. And there are more of us. We have the strength on our side, and we pull her back. 5 is swinging his flashlight down against Cave Boy's head, screaming at it, and we're all pulling, punching, kicking, as Cave Boy's moans of anguish grow louder and louder. He reaches out with both hands, shuddering under the blows that we're delivering, and grabs 7 by the head, jerking her towards them. She stumbles and loses her footing, and she's pulled from our grip. Cave Boy holds her up and promptly snaps her neck with a sickening crunch. There's a scream. I feel like I'm above the scene, looking down on myself as Cave Boy keeps going, cracking, snapping, and eventually tearing into her hungrily like an animal, slamming her body down onto the rock and losing himself to the frenzy. We leave her. I mean, what else can we do? And so on we run, following the trail of glowing fungus piles until 4 grabs me roughly by the hoodie and pulls me sharply to the right. Guys, she says, down here, this way. We follow her down. 5 trips, but I catch him by the collar and I pull him back up, stumbling over the rocky and uneven floor. We crash into a wall and 4 hushes us all at once, desperately and urgently. 4. 6 begins, her voice thick with fear. What are you? Shh, she urges again. Listen. And I do. I try to listen past the noise of my own heartbeat, of our deep breathing, and at the edges of my hearing, I do pick something up. A noise, a low rumble. It could be anything, but it's not constant, it's subtle. But it seems to get slightly louder and then slightly quieter again in pulses. You hear it, she says, and we nod. I think it's the sea, you guys. We're not far from the cliffside, right? I don't know how far below ground we are, but that could well be the sea. And if it is, then that might be our way out. 5 nods, but he doesn't respond. His eyes are wide, his face a deathly pale. He's in shock. We all are, I suppose. 6 at least is trying her best to maintain composure. Okay, it's a decent plan, I think. Let's do it. We'll listen for the sounds of the sea, if it is the sea, and try and get as close as we can. We turn the flashlights off and we allow our eyes to adjust and we press on. We take turns being at the front and back and in the middle of the procession, looking all around us as we shuffle through the darkness, below, above, everywhere really, looking out for signs of Cave Boy. Our ears guide us and we follow tunnels that seem to lead toward the gentle rushing in the distance, a rumbling which grows louder as we approach, until we are certain that it can be nothing other than the push and pull of the waves against the cliffside. The pale form of a figure slumped up against the wall ahead becomes suddenly visible through the gloom, illuminated in the faint blue light of the mushrooms. 5 is at the head of the procession and he flings an arm out to stop us in our tracks, and we freeze with our breaths held. But the figure is too small, too skinny. It does not look tensed or primed. I squint. It looks like it's a skeleton. 6 whispers from behind. We cautiously approach and sure enough, a broken skeleton sits battered on the floor against the rocky wall, its skull cocked to the side, its jaw missing. The stems and vines of the blue fungus are intertwined with its bones, through its ribcage, in and out of the holes for its eyes, its nose, looped around and around its spine. Who did this set of bones belong to? It looks vaguely man-sized, but then I have no real idea how big skeletons actually are. It could be a man's. I think on what 2 had said to me, his final words as he cast down the ladder. Father needs you. He's alone, you see. What does he mean by that? I grimaced down at the twisted skeleton at my feet. Could this be him? 2's father. I rub a hand across my forehead and share my thoughts out loud with the group. They are stirring and swearing before I finished. What do we actually know about 2's dad? 6 asks, pushing her glasses up her nose. Died before he was born. My girlfriend murmurs in response. Supposedly. 1 and 2 came down here before, I remember. I'm sorry, I should have told you guys sooner, but well. I trail off. They've been here before. 5 asks incredulously. That's what 1 told us, yeah. I reply, gesturing to 4. They scoped the place out, the 2 of them, by themselves. And we're silent for a moment, all looking down at the skeleton. It's a sad sight. Down here in the darkness by itself, alone. I always thought that CM was just some prankster, you know. 5 mutters. Colin McCreed. He goes on. I never thought that the stories they attribute to him would actually be true. Maybe this is him, 6 says quietly, gesturing to the skeleton. It can't be, 4 replies. He skipped town. Did he though? 6 says back. How much of the rumors are true, do you think? What do we really know about this guy? What happened to him? And the answer, of course, is very little. We simply don't know. We ponder this as we continue on along our way. I grant the skeleton a final pitiful glance before he disappears behind us, lost once again in the darkness. The sound of rushing water becomes clear and loud ahead. The walls are damp. The curious fungus grows thick between the cracks. I hear a noise down one of the tunnels to my left, like a groaning. I'm at the front now and I halt and spin, forcing the group to a sudden stop as I reach instinctively for my flashlight. My fingers twitch, but I resist the urge to click it on. I instead squint and stare into the dark. There's nothing but shadows. Did I imagine it? The groan. The sound of the water has made it difficult to pick up on the lesser noises. "What is it?" my girlfriend whispers. "Did you see something?" I thought that I might have heard it," I whisper back, "but I'm not sure." We stand in silence for a little longer, but there's no use hanging around. We walk a little faster. Round a corner we go, further round until we find ourselves in a new cavern. The floor is covered in dark cracks, some thin, some massive, holes to the depths that lie even deeper below. The ground falls away not too far ahead, and given by the noise, it must be an underground river of some kind. Seawater, judging by the smell of it. There is a rocky outcrop, a natural, narrow bridge that leads across the dark drop and over to the other side, where a tunnel leads off into the unknown. And on the ground before the bridge are the mushrooms. They have been torn from the walls and placed carefully into an obvious pattern. "Oh shit," I hear to my left. "Oh no," as Six steps forward. The pattern you see the mushrooms are arranged in the shape of a large six, glowing in the dark. Six crouches down and she reaches a tentative hand out towards it. I take a step closer, as do the others, and it looks like she's about to touch it. The six that has been created on the rock at our feet. But she pulls her hand back with a little gasp and a turn of her head, as if she's just noticed something else. She instead reaches out to the side and collects two small shiny objects in her fingers. "What is it?" Four asks. "What have you found?" Six does not reply. "Six," Five hisses. "What have you found?" She turns, shaking, holding the objects out to us in her open palm. They glitter under the light of the mushrooms. "They're my earrings, you guys," she says quietly. A groan from one of the tunnels makes me start and jump in alarm. It's close. It sounds so close I can't take it. I do exactly as Seven did. Like a fool, I grab my flashlight and I try to switch it on. But I had forgotten. It doesn't work. I had broken it earlier when I had bashed it against the rock. I drop it and I grab one from my girlfriend's belt, unclipping it and fumbling for the switch as I turn it on and shoot the beam down the tunnel. "Hey!" I swear that I can see something scurry just out of view. Something pale. I'm sure of it. I'm so sure. "What are you doing?" Five says to me, shoving me. "Turn it out, you idiot." "There's something there," I hiss. "You didn't hear it. None of you heard that." Four squeezes my shoulder. "I didn't hear anything. Are you sure that?" She begins, but she's cut off by a piercing shriek. Five's flashlight goes on too, and our hearts pound in fright, turning and casting our beams over to Six. She's on the ground, scrabbling desperately. There's something wrapped around her leg. It's a hand. It's K-Boy's hand. The top of his head appears from one of the dark cracks, his eyes flashing as he screeches, dragging Six towards it as she kicks and flails and screams. I run to her, grabbing her by the hand, staring into her eyes that are pleading, begging for rescue. Four helps me as Five starts yelling and kicking at K-Boy's head, and I'm suddenly angry. I'm tired, cold, scared, and furiously angry. "So it's all for nothing then," I bellow to no one in particular, no longer able to keep hold of the stress. The whispering, the stumbling around in the dark with no light. It's all for nothing. You're always watching, aren't you, K-Boy? Watching and waiting to pick us off one by one. And while I've been dragged to the ground, I lift my leg and bring the heel of my boot down onto K-Boy's hand with a crunch over and over. The creature wails and relents, disappearing below the cracked surface momentarily as 5 stomps on his head. For a cruelly hopeful moment, I feel a flood of triumph, of success, but it is tragically short-lived. Cave Boy pushes back up, squeezing himself from the crack with a terrifying speed and surge of energy, howling as he shoves 5 violently out of the way, sending him sprawling up against the rock wall with a dull thud. The horror crawls towards me, jaw swinging, and in pure instinct I cover my face, rolling to the side in a last-ditch attempt to protect my neck. But he does not go for me. He goes for 6. And he kills her. I hear her screaming, loud, then louder, and then silenced. I lift my head, watching through gritted teeth as he drags 6's corpse up to the side of the wall and starts breaking her apart. 5 sprints by me and with 4's help, hoists me to my feet, and together the 3 of us run, stricken, towards the bridge. Cave Boy isn't going to stop. He won't stop. He's going to keep messing with us and picking us off one by one until we're all dead. We have to get out. Sprinting single file over the rocky overhanging bridge, I shoot a glance down and regret it immediately. My stomach lurches as I realize just how high up we are. The salt water below is dark and violent, rushing and roaring mercilessly far beneath. But if the water got in here, then that means that there's a way out. 5 enters the tunnel at the far side and stumbles to an immediate stop, swearing angrily. He turns back to us. "It's blocked. The way is blocked." I push past him, staring at the tumbled rocks that block our way, and I don't even hesitate. I lurch forwards and grab onto one of the rocks, grasping and pulling it towards me with all my might, heaving it from its spot and towards the stony ground. Small stones that make up the wall are dislodged and tumble down along with it, but the sound that the larger makes as rock collides with the rock is cringingly loud. I turn to look behind me as 4 and 5 start to madly scrabble at the fallen stones, pushing and pulling them out of the way as best they can. Cave Boy is hunched over 6's body, but he turns too and we make eye contact. "That horrible creature. You can go to hell." "Keep digging," I say to the others in a voice as cold as the surrounding stone. I walk away from the tunnel and step forward towards the bridge. My girlfriend shouts after me, "What are you doing? Come back." "Just move the rocks and get out of here," I shout back, clenching my fists and standing my ground, holding my flashlight tight and ready to use as a weapon as Cave Boy half walks, half crawls to the edge, stepping tentatively onto the bridge. He comes another step closer. I brace, and he stops. He looks me in the eye. He looks at me with those deep, dark, shadowed pits, and he groans, reaching out a hand towards me, glowing blue mushrooms spiraling out from the narrow cracks in the bridge beneath to feed into the skin of his hand and arm. Unblinkingly, I slowly shake my head, staring him down. I can hear my girlfriend screaming from behind me. I hear the scrabbling and thudding of rock being broken away from the blockage. "What do you want, Cave Boy?" I mutter to the abomination through clenched teeth, sweating, shaking with tension. He stops, stock still like earlier, like a statue, until his neck cracks horribly to the right. I jump in alarm, but still I hold my ground. Cave-Boy's jaw grinds and he retches. He makes a terrible choking sound and then a quieter one, like a whimper. And then he speaks. "Legend," he croaks. My eyes widened and a renewed burst of adrenaline flows like river rapids through my body. I do not reply, I just stare at Cave Boy, staring in horror and confusion. Legend? What is he saying? What does he mean? I watch as Cave Boy takes a step back. He reaches down and from the edge of the drop, he grabs a clump of the glowing blue mushrooms. He looks up again, retakes that step forward, and he reaches out. He holds his hand out towards me, palm up, showing me the collected fungus. Is he offering them to me maybe? I'm lightheaded and I have to keep my focus to avoid stumbling, even where I stand, stumbling and risking a fall to the rushing water below. "We have to leave this place, K-boy," I whisper. "It's all that I can manage. You have to let us go. We don't belong down here in the dark." He places the mushroom by my feet and his eyes flash bright blue. "Neither do I," he replies, and he lurches forwards. I scream out to the others and tell them to go, and I raise the flashlight high, ready to smack it against K-boy's jaw, but I am too slow. I am far, far too slow. Caught off guard, he charges me, but he does not strike. He pushes past me and the bridge is narrow and there is nowhere to go. I stumble and I slip over the edge. The flashlight tumbles from my grip as I spin, and I manage to grab a hold of the rock of the bridge's edge, bringing myself to a sudden and jolting stop, hanging. I grunt in pain, dangling from the side of the bridge with my feet kicking in air, and the flashlight falls to become lost in the churning water below. I struggle, swearing with effort as I try to clamber back onto the bridge, but it's taking all my effort to simply hang in place. Cave Boy staggers towards the others and they're so close. They're so close to breaking through the rock that I can see it. But they're too late. Both of them push back, punching and shouting, throwing rocks, but they cannot stop him. Cave Boy grabs a hold of my girlfriend's hair and turns, dragging her back across the bridge. "No!" I grunt from my position, straining as I try with all my might to clamber back up onto the rock. "No!" She's panicking now, on her back as she's dragged past me across the bridge to my right, back over to the other side, and she makes eye contact with me as she struggles and screams. Cave Boy slams her up against the wall and grabs a hold of her neck. "James!" she screams at me. "Bree!" I begin shouting back at her, but a hand forcefully covers my mouth and stifles my words. It's Five. I feel him grab my collar, my arm. He grits his teeth as he hauls me back up onto the bridge and back onto the rock. And Cave Boy snaps my girlfriend's neck. Brianna. Her name is Brianna, and he hunches over her and starts to tear her apart. I can't even comprehend what I'm seeing. It feels like I'm in a dream, a nightmare. But I'm vaguely aware of Five dragging me, up pushing through the last of the rock blockage, up pulling me through tunnel after tunnel, closer and closer to the source of the rushing water. The sound getting louder, the walls getting damper, the fungus thinning and disappearing, and the smell of the salt getting stronger. And we stumble at last into a smallish cave. There are no more tunnels here, just a narrow shelf of rock, and below us, water, not flowing, just rippling. The sound of the sea is loud, and Five sits us down and he tells me his plan. I'm not really listening. He tells me that we're going to wait, and so that's what I do. What we both do. We wait. For several long hours we wait. Tensed, not quite in silence but close enough. I cry for a while, the sobs racking my aching body, and the water below us recedes. Slowly but surely it goes down. Wet rock platforms become visible. The water recedes further, and a passageway appears below. Five jumps down into it and I follow, the water coming up to our knees. We crouch and follow the passageway through. It's not very deep or long, maybe 10 feet or so, and it leads us out and up into a larger cave. A cave with natural light. A cave that opens up to the sea, the receding tide, and the pale gray glow of the morning sky. Matt puts his hand on my shoulder. That's Five's name, Matt. And we wade through the icy water, over the rock, and then over the gray pebbles and the sand. Up we climb, slowly but surely up the side of the cliff, following rugged pathways where we can. We make it back up onto the land, and we go home. They never found the bodies or Cave Boy. A whole operation was launched. I'm sure you can picture it. Police tape, cars, cameras, search parties, floodlights, and forensic scientists. We told them everything, the whole story. They held us for a while, interviewed us again and again and again, but we could give them nothing, not really. So eventually they just had to let us go. They never found half the stuff that Matt and I told them about. They never found the drawings on the wall, the secret stairs, or the broken skeleton. I think they found the rules, though, carved into the rock as they were. No names, no laughter, no silver or gold. No coming back after, no tales untold. And they found the mushrooms too, the glowing blue fungus, and they took some samples, and quite dangerous things apparently. The spores alone, they say, can induce nasty hallucinations, especially in cramped and enclosed spaces. They wanted us to go back down with them, to show them where to go, which passages to take, but I told them no way. I think now that they're planning to just block the hole off for good. The first thing that I did when I got back that first morning, I unplugged Brianna's phone, still on charge in my room, and I looked through it. I can't say what brought on the urge, but the urge was there, and I was still in a daze really, I think. But I searched through it completely, and you know what I found? A long series of interesting messages. Very interesting messages indeed. It turns out that Brianna was cheating on me with number 2, Caleb being his real name. She had been for some time. The evidence couldn't have been clearer. No tales untold. You think you know a person. As for 2 himself, he disappeared just like Colin McCreed. Vanished off the face of the planet. Disappeared to somewhere else, I should think. Smart guy. Because if I ever see him again, I'm going to kill him. It was me that Brianna called out for, though, at the end. She called out for me, not for him. I don't know, it feels like that means something, I guess. I don't really know how to feel. 5 and I haven't spoken much since, or Matt and I should say, but I know that the guy's in therapy now. I'll probably be following him in there soon enough. I keep replaying that night by the hole over and over again in my head. The 7 of us all stood there around it in the wind and rain, buzzing with nervous energy, with anxious but excited anticipation. One was an idiot, Jeremy, selfish too. I never should have allowed myself to get wrapped up in his plan, but I can't place the blame entirely on him. We'll be the legends, he had said. The new legends. And what can I say? The stories have already spread faster and further than those of Colin McCreed ever did, I should think. Jeremy was right. He was absolutely right. We're the legends now. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Missing out on a show that everybody's talking about isn't an option for me. I'm constantly signing up for this streaming service or that one, and then a few months later, I realize that I've still been paying for the service long after I finished the show. Getting Rocket Money was a real game changer for me. They found my unwanted subscriptions and they even helped me cancel them, so I never had to worry about them slipping through the cracks again. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps today. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. The most sobering moment of my life happened as I hid underneath a moldy and waterlogged desk. Underneath that desk, I realized that, in all probability, this was it. I would never be able to go home again. I realized this as I hid from the snarling and heavy-breathing thing that I could hear just beyond the thin metal backing of the desk. The thing that I was sure would be the death of me. Sam, Nathan, and Ellie climbed into the truck, a snow-white 2016 used Chevy Colorado. my pride and joy since I had driven it off the lot only 2 years ago. Having already driven 2 hours, they weren't looking forward to another hour and a half, staring out of the window into the dull countryside of rural Tennessee. Once the last seatbelt had clicked, I slid the gear shifter in reverse and backed out of the empty lot of a Barnes & Noble bookstore. Within minutes of reaching the highway, Nathan had put in his earbuds. He was content with staring out of the window and listening to the latest episode of whatever his latest podcast fixation was. A look in the back seat revealed Sam scrolling through Instagram, and Ellie fast asleep on his shoulder. A puddle of drool cast a shadow of inevitability on his shoulder. He didn't seem to pay any attention to it. The silence was fine with me. I liked it, and evidently so did they. I had only known Sam and Nathan for just north of 4 months and Ellie only 7 more than that. Yet still I had no hesitation bringing them along for something that I usually did on my own or with one other person at the most. They all came off as capable enough to run away if we heard sirens outside, and mentally strong enough to not give up any names if they weren't fast enough. I had heard of this place in passing from some guy online. The post read, "School abandoned in the late 70s or early 80s, filled with all kinds of cool stuff." The post contained a myriad of photos of the hallways, dark and dusty, filled with what seemed like moving boxes, stuffed to the brim with books whose pages were no doubt laced with asbestos by now. The rest of the photos were things that he had pulled from said boxes. A few interesting things, old magazines, books, and a cassette tape labeled "Sex You Up," and promising enough. There had been times that a place like this looked like this. Old, filled with all kinds of relics from decades and generations that are long in the dirt. A single post was all that it took. One look at the geotag in the photo and I knew where it was. I had taken to looking in the inspect menu as most people don't like to give out addresses to these places. They adopted this faux anonymity for fear of graffiti artists covering the once spotless walls with a myriad of genitalia, profanity, and bad attempts at tagging their street names. All they did was make it take 20 more seconds for those who knew what to look for. The trip was on the longer end of the spectrum. The GPS had our drive time at 3 hours from my front door. After a quick game of road trip ABCs, everybody was off into their own little world. As the exit signs became fewer and fewer, and the 6-lane highway slowly turned into a one-way dirt road, I felt a weird sense of calm. All at once, my anxieties about this trip had faded. I didn't care if we couldn't get in. I didn't care if we would be the only ones there or not. I pulled into a small 2-pump gas station only 30 minutes from the decrepit ruins that could barely be called a school anymore. Out of instinct, I pulled out my wallet from my back pocket and flipped my debit card into my left hand. I paused for a moment as I realized that I would need to go inside to pay. Staring at the pump and the decades-old buildup of dirt and muck between the price sticker and the scratch-covered plate glass. Walking inside to pay, I stopped by a handwritten sign taped on the front door, equally as dirty as the pump. The sign read, "Cash only, no card." I stepped inside and was immediately thrown into the past. The walls were plastered with beer and cigarette ads, ranging from the 60s to the late 90s. The large room reeked of stale cigarette smoke and antifreeze, leaking from the no doubt ancient AC unit. Stepping up to the counter, I felt out of place, in opposition to these sweat-stained t-shirts, ragged jeans, and yellow trucker caps. I wore stainless Levi khaki pants, canvas Nikes, and a thin green flannel. The clerk looked me up and down for a moment. "What do you need?" the aged man behind the counter had asked. When he spoke, I was able to count the 5 yellowing teeth that he still had left. I pulled out my wallet, 2 crumpled singles of 20 and a receipt for dinner the night before. "Do you take debit?" "No card," he said, pointing to the sign on the door. "What are y'all here for?" He motioned between me and the others through the window next to him. "Ain't much to do here but work." He glanced back outside. "And y'all don't strike me as the type." "We're photographers. There's an abandoned school nearby that we heard about. Seemed like it was worth the drive." "Son, I'm gonna give you some of the best advice that you've ever heard." His voice somehow began to even get heavier as he spoke. "Some doors are locked shut for a reason, and sometimes that's for the best." He stared at me with such intensity that it felt like he was staring at a hole right through me. When it looked like tears were about to well up, I began to look for any way out that I could. "Yeah, 20 on pump 2. I slid the bill across the counter. He took it without breaking eye contact. "You stay away from there, you hear me?" I didn't answer. "You best pile your friends back into that spacecraft of a pickup you're driving. Turn your happy butts around." "Yes, sir," I said, turning my heel and making my way out of the door. Ellie was perched against the truck bed, eyes trained on Sam next to her. After about 2 minutes, the pump shut off and I closed the tank and reholstered the nozzle into the pump. And in a moment, we were off again. Nathan had one earphone out. Nathan's phone was sitting in the empty cup holder between us. The screen was still on. Enigmatic, the tragic mystery of Flight 1015. A story about people going missing. That didn't seem like the best thing to be listening to right now, but who was I to judge? As the road kept going in a straight line, I began to zone out, picturing all the things that we could find inside, the photos that we could take. In what felt like 5 seconds, the GPS dinged at me. "You've arrived at your destination." When I became fully aware again, I found myself parked in front of the school. The faded sign read, "Alderson Academy. The Word of God guides us." The lot was barren pulling in. My tires warbled and crunched over the tall crabgrass and weeds growing between the cracks in the concrete lot that looked like it hadn't been attended to since before I was born. 3 cars sat dormant at one end of the lot. Lined neatly in a row, all of their windows had been either rolled down or smashed. Their insides had been ransacked as if somebody had wanted to get rid of any resemblance to the interior of a mid-90s Ford Taurus. The dashes were smashed, glove compartments were gone entirely, and the steering wheels looked like they had been on the losing end of a fight with a sledgehammer. Each interior emitted the slightest hint of bleach from no particular source, as if the entire inside had been drenched at one point or another. Putting on our respirators, I found myself itching for a reason not to go inside. A burning sensation began to form at the pit of my stomach. All of a sudden, I was the one with cold feet. I had practically begged the other 3 to come with me. I couldn't just turn around. I found myself making a mental list of all the things that could go wrong. When I ran out of any plausible ones after the first few seconds, I fastened my respirator and made my way to the front door. Sam, Nathan, and Ellie not far behind. "You do this kind of thing a lot," I heard Nathan ask from behind me. When I turned around to answer him, I saw that the question was directed towards Sam. I didn't hear his answer, something about his brother in Peru. My mind was more occupied with what the man at the gas station had said to me before I left. "Some doors are locked for a reason." Those words echoed back and forth as I wrapped my fingers around the master brand padlock that held the front door shut. Next to the door stood a stone cherub. Slightly green with moss, it held a small basket above its head. Around the back, we stumbled on a window that had been left open. Not smashed, open. Behind the window lay a thick sludge of darkness, so thick that my flashlight was unable to pierce beyond a few feet past the window frame. Without hesitation, Ellie jumped through and landed on what sounded like a thin layer of gravel on a linoleum floor. Her personally customized worn Air Force Ones shifted back and forth, slowly eroding the floor with each step. This was layered with the oohs and ahs from somebody who had never set foot into an abandoned building. Next was Sam and Nathan after him. As I watched them go inside, I felt the same burning sensation in my chest that I had only ever experienced at the gas station. It felt like somebody was staring right through me. I stuck my head inside of the window and my eyes quickly adjusted to the blinding darkness. Everyone seemed off in their little world, each of them distracted by a different element in the room. Pulling my head back out, I was instantly blinded by the searing light. As I rubbed my eyes, I scanned the tree line, looking for any reason to pile back in the car and leave. Nothing. I saw a little bit of movement not far into the thicket, but managed to convince myself that it was just a squirrel. When my feet landed on what I had correctly assumed was a dirt-covered linoleum floor, I found myself making direct eye contact with a dusty painting of a giraffe picking leaves delicately from a treetop. As I scanned the rest of the room, I noticed everyone filing out of the collapsing doorway and into the main hallway that, from what I could guess from the pictures, stretched the entire length of the building. As I shuffled behind them, all was still taken aback by the enormity of the place. As we began to walk deeper into the maze-like design, beams of light darted from corner to corner, illuminating every crack and crevice the building had to offer. It wasn't long before we began digging through boxes, our form of archaeology. "Sam, come look at this," Nathan said as he had emerged from a doorway. All at once, 3 flashlights blinded him. He was holding something but kept it behind the door out of view. When the light hit his eyes, he shot both hands in front of his face, one to take off his glasses and the other to shield his eyes. As he did, whatever he held slammed to the floor with a loud crash. Whatever glass that he was holding was now in 1,000 different pieces scattered around his feet. Dang it! He bent down and fished out a small photo from what had been a picture frame and shined a light on it. The picture was a spitting image of Sam, with everything from the dirt mustache that one could almost call a real piece of facial hair, to the shoulder-length jet black hair. Sam laughed and took the photo and held it up to his face. I lifted my camera and took a picture. Sam folded the photo and shoved it into his back pocket. "It's mine now," he laughed. I began to walk around more, snapping photos of almost everything in sight. In what felt like seconds, I realized that I had secluded myself away from everybody else. With each click of the shutter button, the flash shot up and illuminated whatever was in front of it before snapping right back down. I took one last photo before turning around to rejoin the group, when I saw a glint of white riding above the doorway that I could barely make out in the darkness. The path to salvation begins with a single step. I figured it looked nice with the light leaking through an open door with light spilling through and onto the filthy linoleum floor. I raised my camera and I snapped a photo. When the flash briefly clicked on, it revealed a long red gash to the left side of a door that led into a bathroom that I'd only just noticed. I clicked the button on the bottom of my light and it sprung to life for all of 6 seconds before sputtering out. I tried everything to turn it back on aside from replacing the batteries with new ones that I didn't have. In all honesty, I shouldn't have left here no worse off than when I had entered, but I didn't. Instead, I resolved to use my camera as a makeshift flashlight, using every flash to map out where I was. The first flash went off and I was all of 3 inches from smacking my nose into a wall. The second flash went off and I was able to get my bearings, and I fell my way to the edge of the bathroom wall. When my fingers wrapped around the cold edge of the painted cement blocks, I took another photo and watched as the gash got wider, with small spatters branching out from the top and bottom, something akin to a monochrome Pollock painting. As my camera flash went off again, it illuminated something that I still have trouble describing. It was a body. while it resembled more of a puddle than a human. Blood, chunks of flesh, covered muscle were strewn about on the floor, creating a standing puddle of it all. Bugs pulsed in and around where I assumed the face was at one point or another. It didn't feel real. I lost my balance as I stared into the darkness. Having seen the flash, my mind was able to vaguely remember the outline of what was now lying 3 feet away in complete and total darkness. Unnatural darkness. My ears began to ring and my legs gave out. My eyes dilated into tunnel vision as I landed heavily on my wrists and smacked my head against the wall behind me. I must have been screaming because in no time, Sam, Ellie, and Nathan were all standing over me. When they first had arrived, I could only make out vague muffled sounds as they beamed their flashlights into my eyes. As they stood over me, my hearing dialed back into reality and I became more aware of the aching coming from the back of my head and the burning sensation on my throat. I had no doubt been screaming. "What's wrong?" Ellie shouted at me. Before I had a chance to answer for myself, Nathan did it for me, letting out a yelp that was cut short by a string of vomit. Sam stood numb, shining his flashlight on the remains. Ellie noticed it next, and she let out a shrill and ear-piercing scream. You don't react the same way you think you would in a situation like this. I always found myself watching horror movies telling the characters to stop standing there and to just run. But at that moment, I finally understood what true fear was. It was paralyzing. It held all of us in place like statues. As we all stood there, sobering up from what we had just witnessed, an even worse thought crossed my mind. What did this to him? And even worse, is it still here? All of these thoughts took hold of everything inside of me, and the only way that I could convey them to the group was 4 words. We need to leave. I stood to my feet, using Ellie's wrist and arm as support to gain my footing. Jesus Christ, Nathan said as he wiped his mouth. What happened to him? His question came off as an equally genuine and morbid curiosity. The way that his voice cracked, it sounded like it almost hurt him to squeak out the question. Sam was still frozen, his light still shining on the body. He watched the insects pulse and scatter around every square inch of exposed nerve. Judging by the oxidation of the blood, whoever this once was had been here for at least a few days, no more than 2 weeks at most. Crap, Ellie let out, and we all glanced over to see her holding her phone above her head. The white background of the emergency dial screen illuminated the brickwork. No signal. No, you've got to be doing something wrong, Sam said, finally snapping out of whatever trance he had been in before, beginning to make his way toward her. You can dial 911 no matter what company's tower you're connecting off of. Well, then there's no tower, Sam. Her voice began to break too. None of us knew how to deal with this sort of thing. I mean, who do you call? Where do you tell them that you are when there's nothing else for miles? When Sam finally tried the phone for himself, he was met with the same busy and no service signal that Ellie had heard. In an instant, they had stopped arguing. From down the hall, the unmistakable sound of boots on the dirty linoleum floor inched toward us at a slow and steady pace. We didn't know what to do. We froze in place for what felt like centuries, as the footsteps inched closer with every step. Whoever had been walking must have heard us notice them because they let out a shrill and almost inhuman shriek that echoed through the hallways. It was met with what sounded like a half-dozen more from outside of the building. Just down the hallway behind us was the cracked open door of what I can assume used to be a classroom of some kind. Nathan was the first to spot it, opting to leave us and slink his way over without so much as a tap on the shoulder. I grabbed Sam and Ellie, and soon we were right behind him. The classroom was laid out as stereotypically as one could imagine a classroom from the mid-70s. One large wooden and water-damaged desk at the front of the room was assigned specifically for the teacher, followed by 4 columns of 7 all-in-one desks. Along the left side of the room were 3 double-door coat closets. Sam and Ellie took one of those while Nathan and I sought refuge behind the desk at the front of the room. As Ellie and Sam shut the door behind them, they crawled inside the closet, and they let the door drop, with a loud clatter against the body of the wardrobe. I could hear them mentally cussing at the same time that I was. The footsteps got closer. None of us could see, but judging from where they had stopped, I was guessing that the person was standing in the doorway. I held my breath, as did Nathan next to me. I held it so long that all I could hear was my heartbeat growing faster and faster until I was sure that it was about to explode. My hands were glued to the floor, every muscle in my body stiff. I did my best to minimize anything that could make any noise whatsoever. A lump formed in my throat as I continued to hold my breath past the point of safety. I wasn't able to exhale until I heard Ellie's loud piercing scream come from the closet. I peeked my head over the desk. The large, hulking figure that had made its way into the room. Its body was almost humanoid. A deer standing on its hind legs, its arms were impossibly long and sloped off of its emaciated body. The tips of what I can only describe as claw-bearing fingers were dripped with red. Following the trail up and across its face led me to the fresh body of Sam. His face had been smashed against the coat hook in the inside of the closet. The end stuck through his eye socket, while the rest of it clung to a small strand of an optical nerve that hung just below of his chin. Faster than my eyes or brains could comprehend, the thing at its fist closed around Ellie's throat before slowly squeezing closed. The blood had rushed to her face, turning it beet red. Her eyes went bloodshot while refusing to blink at the monstrosity before her, almost trying to deny what was happening, to rationalize. This only lasted roughly a second before the thing made a complete fist, with a loud crack around Ellie's neck. Her scream ceased and her head dropped like a floppy children's toy. The thing relished at the moment, letting out 3 short and shrill screams at the top of its lungs, dripping red and saliva down the tattered and bloody clothes that it wore. By their condition, I assumed that it had stolen them from another person who had probably come to explore. When it grabbed and ripped off Sam's hanging eye and raised it to its lips, I slowly and carefully lowered myself back down to the ground below the desk. Nathan had plugged his ears with his hands and sat in the fetal position. I didn't blame him. And given my history of dealing with traumatic events, I'm still surprised that I wasn't doing the same thing. The sounds it made were awful. A cacophony of slurping, snapping, and ripping sounds drifted from the wardrobe. I went back to being paralyzed by fear. As it continued eating, I realized that this would probably be it. My life would come to a close with no loud bang. I would die as unremarkably as I lived. At this moment, I realized just how much I had taken my life for granted. All I wanted to do was break down and cry at the feet of God, apologize for every transgression that I had ever made against anyone or anything, to beg for my life. I began to quietly cry. A tear rolled down my cheek, and I didn't want this to be the end. As the teardrop hit the floor, the feast had stopped. My heart sank. I heard heavy panting from just beyond the desk, followed by one long and wet shriek. I could hear the concoction of blood and saliva being ejected from the creature's throat as it tried to communicate with whatever or whoever it was outside. Nathan panicked. He tried to run and he almost made it past the abomination, but it shot its lanky arms out and grabbed Nathan by the ankle, dropping the big guy painfully to the floor, knocking the wind out of him almost immediately. He tried to scream, but the lack of air in his lungs wouldn't let him. I did something that I still have trouble trying to justify. I ran. The way that I saw it, Nathan was dead. He was a sacrifice. The moment the thing had wrapped its bloody claws around his ankle, he was already reduced to a headstone that marked a closed casket funeral. I pivoted around the desk, knocking over every desk as I passed it to give myself as much lead room as possible. I heard Nathan's last attempt at a hoarse scream get cut off with a loud crunch. It let out one more high-pitched yell before I heard it begin to chase me. No, run after me. I pivoted around the doorway and ran down the hallway, one foot in front of the other. I dipped and dodged every stack of boxes and bookcase in the hallway while, behind me, I heard it barrel into every single object and keep going unfazed. At one point, after I had made it to the west wing where we had entered, I turned around to see it galloping on all fours after me. It was closer than I had thought, only about 5 feet behind my back foot. I kept running. My legs burned as if my veins pumped battery acid. I turned one last corner and saw the entrance to the room that contained the open window. I powered through and slid on the floor, catching myself by gripping the door frame and sliding my feet in. As I took my first step inside, the thing was going too fast to stop on a dime. I didn't waste the opportunity. I barreled straight through the window without trying to open it. I covered my face in the glass, sliced through almost every piece of exposed skin. I crash-landed against the crabgrass lawn and flipped to my back. The deer peered out at me from the blinding darkness. The wax jacket that it was wearing flopped open to reveal exposed rib and muscle. It did not attempt to reach me, simply slinking away to finish its meal. I began to laugh hysterically. I had no rhyme or reason. It was just the only response that I could muster up to keep myself from either passing out or shutting down completely. I laid my head back in reverence only to see a small child standing over me. He wore a small mask made from the skull of what looked like to be a dog. He raised his finger to where I approximated his mouth to be in a shush gesture. I felt something sturdy crack against the side of my head, and I slipped into a peaceful sea of pitch black. When I came to, my head was throbbing and my hair felt wet and heavy. It was dark out by now. I have no idea how long I had been unconscious. All I knew was that it looked like the sun had set hours beforehand. In front of me were 8 figures around a bonfire. All were dressed in robes and wearing animal skull masks that obscured their faces. I tried to move but came to the realization that I couldn't move. 2 large ropes had been tied around my chest and my legs too, and kept my back flat against a tall oak tree. One of the figures approached me, a woman. Her blonde hair protruded the sides of her mask and draped down her shoulders. She pushed her face only 2 inches from the tip of my nose, and I let out the only response that I could think of. "What is this? Who are you people? I'll give you anything, just let me go." The woman removed her mask. Her face had been disfigured at one point or another. Large scars left tracks all over her face. Her lips had been cut open on multiple occasions. "Shh," she said, revealing a set of deep red teeth. She shushed me as if she were a mother trying to calm down an unruly child. "It's not about money, it's about you," she said as she pointed one finger at my chest, still talking in a calm voice. A sweet voice that almost made me forget where I was. She extended her left hand behind her with her palm open, still pointing one finger at me and never once breaking eye contact. One of the other figures, a man this time, handed her a very large and very old hunting knife. She traced it up and around my torso, eventually landing on my stomach. She balanced the knife tip just above my belt buckle. "This is going to sting, but it will all be over soon," she said, still talking in that nurturing voice before pushing the knife into my stomach. I was met with the worst pain that I had ever felt in my life. I screamed and she shushed me again. She began to drag and twist the knife. When I wouldn't stop screaming, she covered my mouth. After what felt like 5 lifetimes, she pulled out the knife. "It's all over, go to sleep," were the last words I heard before I lost consciousness again. When I came to, the sun had risen. The bonfire was nothing but smoldering embers and burnt logs. Around it lay the bodies of all 7 figures still wearing their robes. The woman lay at my feet, still. All at once, I was reminded of the surgery that I had been given the night before. My knees gave out and I slid down the tree into a squat that did nothing but add to the pain. I let out another scream. Over the next several minutes, I began to break away from the rope by sliding up and down the rough tree bark. After I was free, the next several days come in flashes. I remember running to my truck only to find it destroyed and bleached like the others. The next thing I remember is running into the road, covered in red and screaming like a madman. At some point, a truck must have stopped for me and let me in because the next thing I remember, I was trying to mumble the story out to the driver as he drove me to the nearest hospital. When he helped me limp through the sliding doors, I collapsed from blood loss. According to Dr. Foster, I died for 2 minutes as they tried to fill me with as much blood and essential fluids as I had lost. Over the coming days, I recovered in the hospital, keeping a close eye on who entered my room. Police came by as soon as I was lucid again. Wiltshire County Sheriff's Department, their badges red. They asked me as many questions as they could before disappearing again. After 5 days in the intensive care unit, I was finally transferred to a shared room and was finally able to sleep through an entire night. I don't like it here. Last night, a nurse came and woke me up in the middle of the night. "It's all over, just go to sleep," she said, smiling at me, revealing a set of deep, red teeth before everything went black. A losing stream, also known as a sinking river, occurs when a flow of water loses volume downstream. Surface streams inevitably lose some water downstream as it seeps into the earth and replenishes the groundwater, which in turn restores that water later on. Cave rivers in certain geologies, those formed from soluble rock like limestone, also lose water which filters into the stone. In any case, the water eventually returns from the depths, bringing with it dissolved elements to sustain the world above. This is but a fraction of the miraculous cycle, revitalizing the surface from the underground domain, nurturing all life as we know it. Forgive the textbook-style lecture, but I'm providing context for what I've seen. My vocation is speleology, the scientific study or recreational activity regarding caves and the like. For me, this manifests as a fervor in exploring them. There are, of course, obvious dangers associated with these activities, and I am not one to push them out of my mind. This all applies to my experience a year ago in a cave that I stumbled upon during my travels through Western Asia. The focus of my travels was to find a cave which had not yet been explored. I took this journey alone. Even now, I have yet to meet an individual able to match my odd passion for traversing where nary a peep of light enters, snuffled out by the damp, cold darkness below. At the time, I was trekking the Konya Plate in central Turkey. The area is known for various sinkholes and caves, a little contradictory when it is thought to be one of the driest areas in modern Anatolia. God, I wish that I would just walk right by that place. But I can justify regret when foreseeing the consequences was impossible. Many will likely see me as an arrogant fool reading this. Maybe, but I ask you at least hear all that I have to say. I set up camp near the entrance shaft around midday after doing a little online research. I'm fairly well versed in the Anatolian regions, but I had never seen a cave listed anywhere close to my location. Well, that settled it. I was certain that this cave was wholly unmapped. I could feel my excitement boiling over as I unpacked my surveying and caving equipment, as well as supplies to bring with me. I made sure to don some light waterproofs, as a small stream led down into the cave's entrance. Caves are practically refrigerators as it is, regardless of the climate. No need to worsen this by being splashed by equally frigid water. Suffice to say, I didn't hesitate to get started. It is important during a time like this to rein in one's excitement, which can swiftly give way to panic if you get lost. In fact, I almost forgot to bring spare batteries for my headlamp, a blunder that could very well have ended in disaster. I took care to detail each tunnel upon reaching a branch or terrain change, using my hand compass and inclinometer to measure the angles in the passage ahead, and then record the distance of the current passage with a tape measure, before proceeding deeper into the hidden world beneath. I noted a peculiar feature at the cave's entrance shaft, an abundance of what seemed to be moss, colors changing from rusty orange to a striking crimson. At first, this led me to believe it was a colony of sphagnum moss, several species of which can be varying degrees of red in color. However, said genus of moss has never been reported to exist in this region. Sure, it exists in some areas of the country, albeit rarely, but this moss is mostly found in humid climates, especially those which allow bogs to develop. The Kanya Plain, as I have said, is the driest area in the country. The annual rainfall just isn't enough to provide the conditions to support moss. I didn't dwell much on the matter as I forged deeper into the tunnels. I had been traveling around 3 hours down what I assumed was once the path of the ancient river, when the ground in front of me abruptly disappeared. A zap of adrenaline pierced my chest as I steadied my footing, knocking a few pieces of gravel into the gaping pit. Seeming to repel the light from my headlamp, crouching low to the ground, I peered over into the round abyss, revealing near vertical walls extending down, well past the reach of my vision. Honestly, that was something that even now I can't figure out. Of all my knowledge of caves, I was aware of nothing that could detail how this shaft had formed. It was too angular, too straight, too sudden. Of course, I'm not an idiot. I didn't have the equipment to explore it at hand, and really, the whole experience had put me off any desire to know where it led. I decided to retreat to the last branch with the use of my handwritten map, continuing down the sprawling passages ahead with the utmost caution. To my relief, I found nothing which compared to that pit of lighting and darkness. After another couple hours, I decided to call it a day. I was satisfied with my progress, and to be frank, I already missed the sun on my skin, however sweltering it may be. Something about that shaft had rattled me, but the fact that I had almost been too late to see it was a good justification. After a smooth journey back, I was momentarily blinded by the sun now close to the horizon. I pored over my map on which I had not yet added any verticality. You try drawing a reliable map in 2 dimensions surrounded by cold darkness, let alone in 3. I let out a deep sigh as I gazed upon the landscape around me. The beauty of our planet has rarely ceased to instill a deep sense of peace in my heart, no matter where I am. The golden tall grass flitted gently in the late afternoon breeze as I finished a bottle of water. Part of me is grateful that I've been able to experience these moments. Another part endlessly yearns for more though. And I'm glad that this is what makes me, well, me. Following the short-lived serenity, I packed a small bag and ventured back to a village that I had passed on the way here, to stock up on food and water. It was far removed in contrast to those that I had grown up around. Children played and ran free in the dusty streets, passing cars being a rarity. Farm produce, vibrant in their colors, sat nestled in wooden stalls attended by wind-beaten men and women. At this time of the day, the people sat and drank tea together. None of that milky nonsense. Only a warm and sweet brew into which time was sometimes added. Despite the nation being such tea lovers, they were a great factor in the introduction of coffee to the Western world. Credits to Ethiopia, though, for its discovery. I was drawn to a small open front store, seeing the cooled bottles of water and the packaged food that was practical for travel. The residents here knew fragments of English, but I am fluent enough in Turkish to translate our conversations for the most part. "Good evening, sir. My name is Quint. Nice to meet you," I greeted the shopkeeper. "Ah, you're not from around here. What brings you to this area?" he replied with a hearty yet tired voice. He bore a wide salt and pepper mustache and a pair of rectangular glasses. "Well, my friend, I'm a traveler. I travel across the world. It's my passion. I said, gesturing towards the street outside. You come with friends? He asked with kind curiosity. Nope, just me here. My head works better alone. I look for unknown caves so that I can explore them and map them. His smile wavered then, a faint change, but a change nonetheless. The old man asked, this time in a quieter and lower tone. Have you found any you like? He laughed a little, but his voice was not so full of life this time. He exuded worry as he awaited my response. I have, yes. It's just down the road, actually. Oh, is it okay if I camp nearby? I've already explored a lot and I need a rest so that I can go back in tomorrow. At this, the store owner's face dropped, much more obviously this time, lip trembling slightly and brow wrinkled in a mixture of fear and pity. You should not go to that place. It is an evil place since long ago and should be forgotten. Blood was spilled by our ancestors for a reason. Don't undo their work, I ask you. A resonating shiver ran down my spine. My thoughts jumped back to that deep hole that I had discovered. It was as if the memory was forcefully pushed to the front of my mind. I stood for a moment contemplating what possible response such a proclamation could warrant. Your ancestors? I asked, unsure if this was the right question. Not mine, but of the land, he muttered. Hittite. I'm not much of a history aficionado, but I recognize the word to refer to the Hittite Empire from around 3,000 or so years ago. That's probably inaccurate, but that is of little importance now. I nodded slowly, feigning contemplation, then resolved that the beliefs of the man in front of me were just that, beliefs. I had my own as well, one of which was that I would not be dissuaded from returning, however oppressive and suffocating the cave may feel. Though I would be lying if I said his words didn't rouse a faint sinking feeling in my gut. Okay, my friend, I'll pack up and leave tomorrow, but I must rest for now and get supplies, I lied. I turned and perused the wares. After a moment, I returned to the counter with water bottles and various packets of cereal bars and powdered soups. With a quick, "Thank you, my friend," I left the store and made my way back to camp. The sky had darkened and these streets were stifled, not quite silent, but like a blanket had been laid over the whole place. I doubt it was anything more than mild paranoia given the events of the past day. Arriving back in my tent, a creeping anxiety overcame my body upon seeing the gaping hole in the rock face ahead. A little fear is not uncommon in such environments, but this felt different. People had supposedly stood on the very ground that I found myself standing on at this moment, enduring all the time between, so had the cave, patient and steadfast, outlasting whole generations and many more to come. I briskly entered my tent and zipped it up, feeling a little ease wash over me. No scorpions or camel spiders came for a sleepover this time, so I couldn't complain. After all, this is what I wanted to do, wasn't it? My calling or something like that, you know. I was thankful at the least for the temperate climate though. Still, that cave, it felt alive in a way. Not in the sense in that it housed a variety of life which was already evidenced by some degree by that moss coating parts of the entry shaft. But no, more like the cave opening itself had a tangible presence that could be felt through the thin fabric covering me. Like a great black eye observing my every move, watching for the moment that I pulled the zipper down to go outside and heed nature's call. After some tossing and turning, I managed to doze off and claim my well-deserved recharge. I woke around 7:30. The night had been merciful and nightmare-free. I put on some cargo shorts and a tank top and then left my tent, which was almost an oven at this point due to the morning sun. I brewed a pot of coffee using a gas stove and tore open a fruit and nut bar, musing over my plan for the day. I had marked any branching tunnels that I had seen along my previous path with red dots, and I took some time to marvel at the fruits of my last trip. It felt as if I were holding the cave itself in my hands, This time I made sure to bring some rope, as well as a few carabiner clips and several self-driving bolts for use with a bolt driver, as well as spare batteries. I realized with a small shock that previously I had not brought a backup lamp with me. After packing one, I set off once again into the water-hewn passages. The moss felt noticeably spongier than it had the day before. It also seemed as if the hue had shifted, but I couldn't be certain. It was definitely less dry than before, though the stream's flow was no different than I had remembered. Intrigued, I tore off a sample to attempt identifying when I returned, since the moss's strange behavior had sparked my interest. Stashing it in my bag, I pressed onward in search of the first branch. To avoid overestimating myself, I settled on a rule where I would map a tunnel to a certain distance, and then return and do the same for the next. I had to stoop a little upon entering the first marked passage, which descended gently and then angled back up and to the left. After rounding this bend, the passage straightened and I saw a distant flicker of green or yellow light, which disappeared somewhere ahead. I paused and tilted my head in confusion. What had I just seen? My mind scanned for a possible answer but returned empty-handed. I opted to brush it off as my imagination, though I kept it in my recent memory so I could think on it later. I had barely reached the end of the passageway when a reverberating snap pierced through the darkness, making me jump. It was very loud, yet I could not discern from which direction it came from. Cave acoustics mess with the senses, the walls warping and reflecting the original sound like a game of telephone. Worriedly, I scanned the solid rock walls around me to look for any signs of a fissure or cave-in. I saw nothing, but I didn't want to take the risk of being crushed by a falling slab. I turned on my heels and my pace quickened, and moments later I was back at the sloping bend. Taking care of my footing, I started to descend, only to hear the thunderous echo once more. Abandoning any patience in regard to safety, I broke into a sprint to reach the bottom of the slope. I was slowed as I stumbled my way up the last incline of the branch, finally bursting into the parent tunnel. Again, it sounded. The rumble almost made me lose my footing as I wheeled to the right and sprinted toward the entrance. This time, I was able to distinguish several quieter sounds following the first, like dry crumbling and cracking of some brittle material. Still, nothing around me explicitly confirmed that a structural break was underway, and as the light from outside came into view, I skidded to a stop. The moss, it had grown. That was impossible, it couldn't be. Moss are slow growers. What had before been a thin padding of the stuff was now closer to huge red pillows. The stream that emerged from these swollen masses was tinted red, as it extracted pigments on its way through. Without further hesitation, I began to build up speed, kicking up dust and stones. I could literally see these soft mounds expanding by the second, like one of those time-lapse videos. Gritting my teeth, I propelled myself forward, and just as the fourth and loudest crack so far resounded, my ears ringing from its intensity, I jumped onto the pulpy scarlet beds, now only 20 or so meters from the sunlight. As soon as my boot made contact with the moss, it was as if I had stepped in superglue. I kicked my free leg in front of me, bracing myself to prevent my knee breaking from my momentum. Dazed, I looked down in terror to see that my feet were barely visible. It was pulling me in. Horrified, I reached forward, grasping aimlessly at slick tufts of moss. This was it. This is how my story ended, and I didn't even know what was happening. I had so much left to fill the pages of my life. No, this couldn't be it. And then it was black. I came to in an aching haze of confusion and fear. I thought that I was still in the tunnel until my brain fully rebooted and I realized that my eyes were clenched shut, so tight that I could see purple noise forming. Slowly, my eyelids relaxed and flickered open. I was lying sprawling on my back, looking up towards the stars. No, too many, and the colors were all wrong. Glittering spots of blue, green, and yellow danced across my retina as I lay there. With a groan, I raised my left hand above my face to see my cracked and chipped, yet still functional wristwatch. 3:41 p.m. My eyes darted between the twinkling expanse above and the time shown, lying in complete disbelief. I wasn't outside. I grunted, pushing myself up into a sitting position. The sight presented to me was staggering. I had been unconscious on the floor of an unfathomably large chamber for how long I did not know. The ceiling looked to be hundreds of feet above. The boreal spectrum cast a grim illumination over the scenery, but I could not determine how expansive this place was. Where in the name of all that is rational was I? I vividly remember sinking in that moss moments from climbing out from the cave's gullet, but where had I wound up? I lowered my gaze from the glow overhead to get an idea of the structures around me. Immense crimson stalagmites towered over the chamber, as well as equally massive hanging stalactites, which seemed to look down upon me in dismissal. Some had met and formed great pillars, looking as if they were all that was holding this place up. I would have attributed it all to the phrase morbidly beautiful, but my mind was racing too fast to consider anything unrelated to finding a way out of this landscape. I stood up with some effort, muscles still sore from my previous actions. Looking to my right, I found more of the ominous formations. To my left, the mother of all monoliths stood before me. It is difficult to convey its size, tenfold thicker than any of the others and stretching towards the stone roof. Red rubble littered the area around it, a result of some unknown assault on the object. Squinting at the lower reaches of the spire, something smaller caught my attention. What appeared to be a raised stone platform surrounded by carved steps on all sides. Keen to get some form of answer, I walked over to the structure, making out a single object on top. I was looking upon a sort of podium, atop which were stone slabs stacked neatly. Many of those entrancing dots of light spotted the ancient altar, which came to realize were some kind of fireflies as they fled on my arrival. Were those what I had seen in the tunnels before? I figured there must have been millions, hundreds of millions of them resting on the cavern's roof. I closed my eyes and took a few deep breaths. I considered the possibility that I had knocked my head, and this was a dream conjured as a result, but it felt real. The pressure on my feet, the rays of emerald light in my eyes, these things could not be attributed to a dream. If it was, then my awareness would allow me to lucid dream and fly my way out of the chamber. Climbing the worn stairs, the contents of these stone plates came into view. They had something carved into them, a myriad of pigments coloring images akin to hieroglyphics. I remembered my backup lamp and removed it from my bag, which had stayed with me through the ordeal. I turned it on and illuminated the tablets before me. They depicted a story which began with a gathering of people, lying prostrate before a huge divine being. On its back were majestic butterfly wings and great oak trees sprouted from its head. Its arms resembled the iridescent tail of a dragonfly ending with human hands. Standing on many graceful insectoid legs, it showered the worshippers with a blessing. The next image showed a green landscape with crops growing twice the height of men. Infants played and frolicked in the fields, some under sun rays, others basking in rain. For a brief moment, I thought back to that shop owner and what he had said about the land's ancient denizens. If this was in fact the Hittite origin, it was remarkably well preserved. I continued reading to see an unsettling portrayal. The entity, who I assumed to be some patron of farming, maybe fertility, stood over the settlements, this time wearing a bitter sneer. Another frame depicted it then abandoning its people. They looked to be crying out, pleading in despair, their hands reaching out toward the titanic being. Had the people done something to upset it? And the next image was in stark contrast to the rest. The same landscape as before, but this time the sky was blazing, the ground dry and cracked. The once lush fields were withered, and the folk who had been dancing in ecstasy were now sullen and bony. Underneath this was, God, I'll just describe it. 1,000 men stood, gaunt frames for the rags that hung from them, while they rotted alive. Most notably their parts, they were, let's just say they wouldn't be having any more children. Doubly so for the 1,000 dead firstborns and 1,000 faces stricken with profound despair. I stepped back for a moment, catching my breath. I'm not generally squeamish, but this was something else entirely. How could a deity allow any of this to happen? I returned to the pedestal and quickly overturned the tablet in morbid apprehension. The next illustration showed earthquakes ravaging the towns and villages and rivers which had been impossibly bent askew from their beds and diverted elsewhere. True Armageddon if I had ever seen it told. I was about halfway through when a splintering crack tore through the ambience. I immediately correlated the noise to what I had heard in my flee from the tunnels. A deep sense of dread grew, winding its way up and throughout my skeleton. I could not at first identify the source, but the answer presented itself before I had the chance to try. I sank in awe as a great chunk of the scarlet mountain before me had broken off. The scale of the landscape made the boulder seem to fall in slow motion. Finally, the hunk of maroon rock drove into the ground with such force that I could feel the earth tremble beneath me. I leaned on the pillar, paralyzed for a moment. A cloud of brown dust plumed from the site of impact, which I hoped I was upwind of. I had enough problems at the moment. I didn't need particulate lung disease as another. Allowing my heart rate to subside, I looked back down at the tablets. Following the doomsday imagery, there was some kind of official gathering. Many of the attendants wore robes and were discussing something in a heated debate. To the right, a recipe for something was inscribed. The characters of the long-dead language meant nothing to me. All I could do was attempt to follow the accompanying illustrations. The first displayed 5 men bleeding into a pot. Their robes featured colorful artwork depicting gods, men in various symbols. It made me think that these were holy men, priests, or shamans maybe. The pot was full to the brim, and the next image showed the people preparing a fire and placing the pot on a hanging cradle above it. Next, an arrow was set ablaze with a flammable liquid and then dunked into the boiling blood. The final step revealed the arrow removed from the blood, burning with a crimson flame, its shade heavily emphasized. Another air-rending clap demanded my attention, this time closer and much higher up. As the crumbled mass fell away, something became visible underneath with a contrasting dark green texture. The fragment shattered against the ground, an even larger cloud of orange dust billowing out into the air. Heart drumming in my ears, I looked back down to the tale of biblical carnage. On the next tablet, a priest stood at the mouth of a cave, facing outwards. It couldn't be. It was. The shape had already been ingrained into the folds of my brain. It was identical. Close to full-on panic at this point, my eyes drifted to the lower portrayal. The creature from the beginning stood leagues above the congregation, bathing them in its shadow. Pure malice and rage were its expression. I felt like it was addressing me directly. Splintering rumbles now rising in a terrible crescendo. I flipped the slab to reveal the final page. The burning arrow was shot by a bowman into the deity's left shoulder. I could almost hear its howls as its very being was separated into 2, one bursting with the same glorious light seen in at the start, and the other a putrid, twisted mockery of divine power. The abomination was pulled into the cave along with the arrow, swallowed whole by the earth itself. I will never be able to rid my memory of the final scene. Cattle, goats, and even people were being sacrificed en masse, their blood forming a gushing torrent which drove its way into the cave. The river was shown seeping through the rock into an immense chamber, where it showered down onto the vile, writhing being. It encircled the creature in a sanguine whirlpool, constricting around it as its appendages flailed around. Blood. These enormous towers were made of blood, but how? There was way too much of it. How many were drained to leave such an unimaginable amount of blood, and for that matter, why blood? And it hit me then. That moss that I had seen. Of course, it wasn't some offshoot of a sphagnum moss. It was another unremarkable species that had been tainted by the blood of the masses. I was emptied of thought when a sudden deep menacing rumble vibrated through the entire cavern, but this was different. It pounded its way through into the core of my being. Impending doom manifested, and I rose my head meekly above the altar. That dark patch that I had seen before, it was moving, oscillating back and forth. All of a sudden, the roaring tremor ceased, and I saw an eye. At least I assumed that's what it was, but it bore a little resemblance. A deep depression in the mottled surface, shaped like a diamond with concave edges, contained a small point of white light that was emerging from the darkness, intensifying until a blinding marble gazed down on my puny form. A crackling voice erupted from within, sounding like the splintering bark of 1,000 trees being felled all at once, booming to address me. "You have changed your minds, I take it." The force of its words made me stagger backwards, and any response that I may have had was throttled as I stared up at the glare of some colossal being. "Why do you cower in silence, human? Speak," it bellowed. What are you talking about?" I stammered, my breathing shallow. I see some time has passed since your people and their self-proclaimed holy men entombed this form, using the very symbol of my gift. Does one not perceive blasphemy at this? It seems not. I'll allow you a gentle reminder. Return me to my body and I shall consider sparing life. Life? What? Mine? I don't know anything, please. I don't even know where I am. I cried, instinctually sensing the waves of anger emanating from the presence, sapping the strength in my muscles as I held onto the podium for support. At that moment, I heard something else. Yet again, its source was unknown to me, but I recognized the groaning of something under immense pressure. Your understanding is not a requirement, human, but know that on the near morrow, the offspring of this world shall be torn from the future's womb. The voice blared, cold yet frothing with ire. All you need to do is share the whereabouts in my body and be done with this. The deep creaking suddenly exploding into a deafening cacophony. A jet of broken rock, blood rather, shot out into the air from the rear, the forest sending shards far into the distant blackness in an instant. What I saw next I wish could be wiped from my memory, but I don't think anyone could forget what then emerged. A vast appendage extended from behind, unfurling in all its awful might. The only way I can describe it was primordial. It looked something akin to one of the wrapper-like pedipalps of a whip spider, rough and covered in bumps and terminated in a collection of extremely long and sharp barbs. It swung around to the front with a speed that wasn't physically possible for something its size. The nauseating stench of a carnal house then permeated my nostrils, as I watched in disbelief as the demonic appendage began scraping away at its prison. Wait, please stop, I sputtered, words cascading from my lips before I even had time to think of them. I don't know where your body is. The grotesque appendage continued tearing away at its cage. Shattered slabs fell by the dozens, further revealing the form beneath to my terrible dismay. So be it, the voice thundered. I shall take the task upon myself. Do not worry your frail mind. I will see it through that this realm is returned from whence it came. The words had a disturbing sense of finality to them. Had Earth just received a sentencing, myself being the sole member of the jury? I continue to hope with all my heart that the question is never answered. The imprisoned being then seemed to set its soul focused on escaping. A second of the bristled limbs began forcing itself out of the side closest to me, fissures spreading through the dried blood like tree roots, grasping and reaching toward this plane of existence. Both limbs free, they drummed and slashed away, until at last the structure failed, collapsing in a deafening whirlwind. The being's true form was beyond words that I'm comfortable writing. It must have stood at least 150 feet tall, 180 with the dead rotten trees which sprouted as horns from its head. Most of it was covered by a sickly black grating carapace. It stood upon vast, triple-jointed legs, constantly shifting for balance, shaking the underlying bedrock and stirring the luminous insects from rest. The torso was vaguely humanoid, but was littered with bulbs that rhythmically spewed puffs of vapor. Countless writhing tendrils came off its back, snaking about the chamber, itching for something alive to grab a hold of it. They moved at such a speed that my eyes barely perceived them. Its face haunted me the most, also humanoid but lacking a jaw. In its place was a cavernous pit filled with fleshy spikes, freely dribbling a rancid and viscous fluid. I saw no nostrils or ears, but its eyes were those diamond-shaped pits that I had seen prior, orbs of pale light ensconced within. With a great effort, I tore my eyes from the behemoth and thought frantically, searching for anything that could possibly aid my situation. I was close to just giving it up when I caught a glimpse of something beneath the remaining tablet. Swiping it off with little regard for their historical value, a deep groove betrayed a square hatch. Opening it, I peered inside to see a bronze arrow, flickering with a meager lilac flame. In terrified confusion, I picked it up to find that instead of being hot, it was strangely cold between my fingers. For a moment, I stared puzzled until I made the link to what I had just read. Regardless of the validity of the carved illustrations, it was my only chance to avoid befalling a terrible fate. With all the determination in my bruised and battered body, I rose my head and began descending the steps. What was I doing? Surely this would mean the end of me. I was but an ant for one of the being's thundering legs to soundly crush. Despite my mind screaming in objection, I willed my legs onward, all the while trying to formulate some plan of action. The flying insects had become frenzied as swaths of light, swarming away from the thing in mass exodus, pelting me like hailstones in the process. Seeing my trembling march, the being let out a deep and reverberating laugh. Its face remained unmoving. It seemed to speak from somewhere else entirely, vibrating from every direction. Suddenly and without warning, I felt an excruciating pain in my crotch. I doubled over, eyes watering, groaning from the searing pain. I had to push through it. Once again, my march continued, now slowed and limping, wading through the swirling and buzzing clouds. You think to do what exactly, child? Tie me down as a hunted boar, the creature spat, venom quickly returning throughout its chuckles. You are alone. I did not answer, for I had none. I was asking myself the same question. My dragging feet came to a stop, causing the entity to tilt its head in bemusement. I admire your resolve, pathetic as it may be, though I grow tired of this futility, it hissed, shifting its pounding legs to face me. In an instant, it raised an arm and swung it toward me. I did all that I could think to and held up my hands defensively. I squeezed my eyelids tight and mentally recited a prayer to an unspecified god. The flies had become like rubber bullets at this point, stinging my skin with each impact. A sonic boom rang through my ears as the attack broke the sound barrier. I was blasted back a few feet as a result, whereupon I opened my eyes to see a bleeding stump in place of where my left pinky finger had been. Otherwise, I was somehow unscathed, for the most part. The force of the attack had cleared the area of the insects, leaving nothing but a graveyard of twitching legs. Looking up, it became apparent that the arm had swiped at the arrow that I had held, now embedded into the sharp extremity. Sizzling cracks spread from the location and the creature howled. Backed by a choir of screeching metal, its arm spasmed violently, forcing me to retreat in fear of being rendered a pile of diced flesh and bone. After a time of stumbling, I tripped and fell onto the cold floor. Turning around, I could see the beast struggling with its wound, scraping away at it, roaring in pained fury. It managed to dislodge the arrow and fling it far into the darkness, before turning its head to look directly into my eyes. It took a step forwards before dropping to a few of its knees, for lack of a better term, and then strained a weakened chuckle. I am patient. Run, little one, and spread word of my coming. Instill fear into your tribes, your settlements. It will be far more exhilarating upon my arrival. Go to hell, you depraved roach, I yelled, coming out more as a fleeting wish than the powerful taunt that I had hoped for. Good, very good. There is little fun to be had in a hasty submission. And with that, the colossus dropped to its remaining knees and collapsed. I don't know how long I sat there panting and heaving. I observed the creature for a while, but it seemed to be in some kind of coma. I wasn't going to check for a pulse, but the mounds on its torso continued to expel gas, which dissipated into the cool subterranean air. After I was certain that it wouldn't be moving anytime soon, I shakily stood up and then retrieved my gear from the altar. It seemed that the only way out of this place was up. Squinting, I could just make out the tunnel. A dark blemish on the ceiling close to the top of one of the columns. I would need to recycle some of my bolts during the ascent, but regardless, I clipped myself into and tightened the harness. I began to climb, one repulsive handhold at a time. Flakes of blood showered me like confetti, celebrating my empty victory. I developed an efficient routine for bolt recycling, descending from a higher rung and unplugging the previous ones. I often had to hang from the rope in near exhaustion to prevent my body from giving out entirely. 30 feet left. Multiple bolts had already slipped my grasp and tumbled back into the hellscape below. I tried to avoid this, though my recently severed finger did not help. It may have been my tired mind, but I could swear that I heard distant rumbles coming from all around. I blocked out any implications regarding the dozens of other scarlet obelisks, nearing the final stretch before reaching the opening. Finally, after more than 200 feet, I clambered into the tunnel that I hoped would lead to salvation. It extended upward another 50 or so feet before my fingers grasped the rim of the shaft's opening. It took a moment to reorient myself to the surroundings, after which I realized where I was. The dark pit whose discovery had shaken me up the day prior. I walked, no crawled my way in the direction out of this nightmare. My knees were cut and scraped on the sharp gravel scattered across the floor, but I persisted nonetheless. While more bearable now, the pain still lingered in my groin, and I refrained from examining the damage as I scrambled my way out. Near the cave's entrance, I was worried initially, seeing no daylight, and I checked my watch to see that it was almost 8 p.m. I could taste fresh air and feel the cool stream running past my knees and ankles, washing away the blood and grime. It was like drinking a glass of ice water after a hot day. After moving closer within range of an almost dead lamp, the moss was mostly gone, a few dry scraps left clinging to the walls. A relief to be sure. On the verge of passing out, I hauled myself past the entrance with a grunt and flopped onto my back, gulping long and deep breaths from the night air. It was nice to see the stars again instead of a colony of cave-dwelling fireflies. My senses had calmed enough to again be accepting of smells, and the distant scent of iron and smoke became apparent. I had had my fill of curiosity, and I pulled myself inside my tent, allowing myself to wane into a deep slumber. I packed up my belongings the next day and cut my trip short. I just didn't have the strength nor will to pursue any further ventures. After some disinfectants and bandages, I returned to my rental car and bought a ticket home for the same day. It was surreal to say the least, sitting amongst fellow plane passengers in their blissful naivety, knowing what I had seen yet surely couldn't speak upon, lest I be shot down with pitied looks and quiet dismissal. The journey home was inconsequential, the usual work or life worries that I may have otherwise had eclipsed by my experience. I immediately visited my doctor, who inquired on my missing finger. I had come, however, in regard to the frequent pains in my lower back and genital region, which had not eased since the day that I left. Of course, no diagnosis was made. All the doctor could say is that the blood flow in the area had drastically decreased, and that necrosis was a possibility. I mean, I wasn't planning on kids, but it might have been nice to preserve the option. I was prescribed some pain meds and sent on my way, for the moment, Months later, I still have not reached any substantial conclusion. There is no closure to be had. I did some research in the ancient Hittite mythologies, and I've in fact found something that seems similar to what I had held witness to. The tale follows a deity by the name of Telepinu, whose desertion led to a similar sequence of events. It ends with a priest banishing the god's anger to the brass containers in the underworld from which naught returned. And that's where the similarities end though. It didn't seem like a demon or an angel or god, but something else entirely. The impurities and flaws of a deity-given form. For one reason or another, I feel that the other bloody monuments in that place might not have been empty. Maybe this process had been repeated many more times than I could comprehend. If so, what of these divine beings who were purified? Where have they gone? Ascended to someplace else? I don't see them anywhere on Earth. So if anybody believes this, stock up on canned goods and other non-perishables. As time passes, it grows harder and harder to quell my hunger and thirst, though I do not starve. Procreate while you can, or not. There is a school of thought which says that it would be a mercy to spare our children the terrors which will inevitably break their shackles and curse those children and their children's children forevermore. The earth has been nothing more than a cleansing site for those above us, allowing them to reach greater heights, and all the filth and depravity that remains has been left for us to inherit. My sister is 2 years younger than me. When we were growing up, she always had her head in a book or was writing something in one of her journals. She liked school and did well there, and she loved the library. It was her second favorite place in the world after home. I was the opposite. The only thing that I ever read was the back of a cereal pack, the TV guide, and the occasional comic book about mutants or zombies or other gross monsters. School was the most boring thing that had ever been invented, and the highlight of the day was when the bell went and I could get out of the place. And I loved being outside. I used to race with my friends through our neighborhood on our bikes or start a game of baseball on a patch of waste ground that would only end when it went dark. The woods just outside of town were another favorite haunt of mine. And in the summer, the river which ran along one edge of the woods was perfect for swimming, or for playing water baseball, which was an invention of mine. As I pedaled and ran and laughed my way through life, I collected cuts and scrapes like my sister collected A+ grades on her schoolwork. I also used to like winding my sister up. Trying to sneak a peek at her journals was a classic. When she caught me trying, which I always made sure that she did, she would turn very red in the face and yell that she hated me. A while later, I would knock on her bedroom door and say how sorry I was, and then ask her if she could help me with my homework. And the amazing thing was, she always did. As we got older and hit our teens, my sister isolated herself even more while I continued to treat life as a game. One evening, I was brought home by the police. A neighbor's window had been broken, which was a total accident. Honestly, it was. After the cops had left, my parents went ballistic with me. I remember one of the things my mom said to me was, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" What, sit in my room all the time brooding? I thought, but didn't risk saying it out loud. I was grounded for a week and sent up to my room with no supper, both of which were a total nightmare. Hours later, I was still pacing my room and thinking up new ways to break out, when there was a quiet tap on the door. I opened it to find my sister standing there with a slice of pizza on a napkin. She handed it over without a word and headed along to her room. I don't know if there's a world speed record for eating a cold slice of pepperoni pizza, but I reckon that I might have beaten it that night. A couple of months after this, when I was still pretty much out on parole as far as my parents were concerned, I was running for the exit at the end of another endless school day when I saw my sister. She was standing by the lockers and a couple of older boys had her backpack. They were going through it and pulling things out and then waving them in my sister's face and laughing. One of them had my sister's latest journal. Through her tears, she was telling them to leave her alone. I saw red. I raced along the corridor, my hands clenched into fists, and I barreled into the boys who were tormenting her. The three of us rolled along the floor in a tangle of punches and kicks and shouting. I managed to elbow one of them in the gut, which left him gasping for breath, and landed a fist right into the nose of the other one. He yelped as blood began to pour out of his nostrils. Seconds later, a bunch of teachers arrived and pulled us apart. As I was marched off to the principal's office, I glanced around and saw my sister retrieving her journal from the floor where it had fallen. She looked up at me and smiled. That smile made the trouble that I got into for brawling worth it. Eventually, the time came for me to leave school. I got a job in a local auto repair shop, which was good for a while. But as another summer drifted into fall, I started to get more and more restless. There was nothing for me in my hometown, and I made the decision that I wanted out. And my route was clear. I joined the army. One beautiful spring morning, I was packing my bag and getting ready to head off to catch the bus that would take me to basic training. Before I left, though, my mom had insisted that I eat a proper breakfast. As I took my seat at the table, I could tell that my mom had been crying, but was doing her best to act as if everything was fine. My dad was subdued. There was no sign of my sister. She had been accepted onto a degree in archaeology and would be studying at a university close enough for her to stay living at home. I understood well enough to know why she wouldn't want to move away. All that socializing with new people would have been too much for her. But that was no excuse for her to miss my farewell breakfast. After I cleared my plate, I told my parents that I was going up to my sister's room to tell her that she could at least wave goodbye. My dad stopped me. He put a hand on my shoulder and explained that my sister did not want me to go, that she would miss me and was worried about me. That threw me. She hadn't said anything to me, which wasn't really that surprising considering that we hardly ever spoke. But still. My dad put a smile on his face and told me that she'd come around eventually and would give me a warm welcome when I came back home for my first leave. He was sure of it. And then he pointed out that I would be late for the bus if I didn't get a move on. I grabbed my bag, shook his hand, and gave my mom a kiss on the cheek. And that was me. I was out the door, on my way to a new and exciting life. One that began in a swirl of early morning starts, runs, drills, salutes, rules to learn, boots to clean, and then falling into bed before starting all over again after never enough sleep. I had bags under my eyes and blisters on my feet, and I was in my element. After basic training came the graduation ceremony. My parents attended. My sister stayed home, which I had been expecting but still felt a flare of disappointment about. And then I was posted to a base in the Midwest to start the next phase of my life in the Army. I had been primed for action and adrenaline and being pushed to my limits. What I got was routine and drills. Boredom set in. I tried to test myself. I used my periods of leave to go free climbing and free diving rather than going home to visit my parents. I could tell they were disappointed about this when I spoke to them, but being back in my hometown was the last thing that I wanted to do. I also tried speaking to my sister a few times and sent her a bunch of messages, but she kept on blanking me. And back on base, my frustration grew. I had to do something. In the end, I went all or nothing and I applied for the Special Forces. I entered the selection process, a driven man. Failure was not an option. The next few years made everything that I had done in my life up until that point seem like a cakewalk. It was extreme and it was exhilarating, and I made it. I was on a total high until it all came crashing down. The night before my first overseas mission, I was called into the CO's office and told that my parents had been killed in an automobile accident. The CO told me how sorry it was and informed me that I could take compassionate leave. Looking back, I find it hard to explain my actions here. I was torn apart by the news. I loved my mom and dad dearly. But I was also due to fly out and do what I had trained so hard for. I was still young and naive enough to believe that combat was going to be amazing. And a part of me thought that if I left the base that night, I might never get the chance to prove myself in the field of conflict. My mind was racing and I made a quick decision. I told the CO that I wanted to go on the mission. Me going home wouldn't bring my parents back, so I would stay with my comrades. I would do my duty. Although I was not allowed to reveal any details about where I was and what I was doing, I was given permission to contact my sister and tell her what I had decided. I tried, but her phone rang out, as did the phone at our parents' home. I messaged her a bunch in different ways, told her that I would see her as soon as I could. Looking back, I feel very ashamed of what I did, but at the time, I was solely focused on the mission ahead. My heart was beating fast as I walked towards the plane on the runway, which would be taking us to our destination. We would parachute out over a jungle region at midnight local time and undertake disruptive activity behind enemy lines. We were out there for 6 weeks. I lost 2 close friends on the deployment, and I returned to base feeling dog-tired and confused. It was too much to process, so I buried it inside instead and went home to see my sister. Waiting at the airport for the civilian flight home, I searched on news websites local to my hometown and found one small article about the accident. My parents had been driving home from a movie theater when they had been hit by another vehicle that had earlier been reported stolen. The police were still trying to trace the driver of that vehicle, who had fled the scene on foot. I boarded the plane in a daze. I was pulsing with anger and weighed down by sadness at the same time. When I finally walked up to the front door of the home that I had grown up in, I felt at breaking point. All I wanted to do was hug my sister and tell her that I loved her. I no longer had a key, and so I knocked. I could see movement inside, and I caught a glance of my sister, but she was moving away from the door. I didn't understand why. I knocked again and yelled out that it was me. A few moments later, I received a message on my phone. It said that I had broken her heart by not coming home for the funeral, and that she never wanted to see me again. I threw my phone to the ground. This couldn't be happening. I hammered on the door, pleaded with her to let me in. I begged her. If we could only talk and sort things out, it would be okay. I mean, surely it would be okay. After a while, I was dimly aware of a siren. It was coming closer. Turned out I was causing such a disturbance that one of the neighbors had called the cops. I knew one of the officers who arrived. We had been in the same year at school. He told me that he was really sorry about my parents, but it was best that I left. I was devastated. I wanted to argue. I wanted to go over and tell the neighbor exactly what I thought of them. But if I had been arrested and charged my military career, it could have been over. And at that moment in time, I didn't seem to have anything else left. I had lost my parents and my sister, it seemed. I apologized to the 2 officers and I headed back to the airport. That was the last time that I was ever in my hometown. After a lost weekend spent locked in a motel room drinking, I returned to my unit. More missions followed over the next 5 years. They are not in any official records. The bottom line is that these were conflicts where my country was getting its hands dirty, but didn't want the rest of the world to know. As for me, I became collateral damage. There wasn't a defining moment where I broke down and couldn't continue. It was a gradual collapse. I drank in secret, I took pills. My nerves were on a knife edge and sleep became a fractured nightmare-infested thing. I would wake up with a yell and lie there coated in sweat. I knew there would be no point trying to get back to sleep. Not when so many painful memories from the missions were there, ready to twist into another hideous dream. Finally, I accepted that I could not go on, and I opened up about my substance abuse to an army doctor. After a bunch more paperwork, boy does the army like paperwork, I was discharged. Being a civilian again though did not feel good. I still woke up from hideous dreams every night, and I was constantly on edge, looking around for threats that were not there. I also tried reaching out to my sister again, but none of the contacts that I had for her worked. I searched for her online and following the digital thread, found out that she had graduated and was now a faculty member of the archaeological department of a university. I felt a swell of pride about this. My little sister, she had done good. I tried sending messages to her via the general contact details shown on the university website. I wanted her to know that I thought she was amazing and wanted to say sorry one more time. I never heard back from any of the messages. I didn't blame her, I didn't blame anyone, apart from myself. I was feeling lower and lower by this point and I started to drift. I hitched rides and slept rough. I avoided people where I could. It was like I was on the run. There's a saying about no matter how far you travel, you can never get away from yourself. I was the poster boy for that saying at that point in my life. After 6 months or so, I found myself in a rural area in the far north. The solitude that I was able to find there felt good, and so I stayed on. I found a derelict cabin and started to do it up. The nearest town was hours away. I was living off the land to an extent. Once a month, I drove into town and stayed just long enough to stock up. I also cashed my army pension at the post office there. Living like this, I found a kind of peace. I liked the way the periods of light and darkness stretched and constricted through these seasons to create extremes. I enjoyed the long days and the nights that held a grip. I loved the silence that was broken only by the wind and the cries of the animals. I could have stayed there forever. But then the policeman knocked on the door and turned my new life upside down. I tensed at the sound of the knock. Nobody had been out to my property all the time that I had lived there, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I went to the window to check who was out there and saw the cap held in his hand, the bulky jacket over his uniform, and the car parked up. There was no reason I shouldn't open my door and wish the officer a civil good morning. So I did. He asked me if I was Jordan Anderson. I answered that I was. And then he looked down at his boots for a moment, and that sent a ripple of unease loose inside of me. I asked him if something was wrong, and he told me in a solemn voice, "It's your sister. She's been reported missing." I told him that he better come in. I offered him coffee, but he said no, so I asked him just to get to it, to tell me what he knew. He looked me in the eye and said, "Your sister's personal file has you down as next of kin and gives your contact details as the Army. When her employer contacted the Army, they passed the message on to the post office in town. The post office called me. You being such a hard man to contact, the message was already 5 days old, and I didn't want to delay things any further, so I drove straight out here. The message said that your sister was working with a group of university students on an archaeological dig at an old mining settlement in a remote area of northern Alaska. They were off-grid as far as mobiles and the net was concerned, but had been in regular contact with the university via satellite phone. Then they fell silent. After a week, there was sufficient concern for their welfare that a local search and rescue team was sent to the settlement, but no one was found there. The authorities are examining the evidence, but as yet, there's no explanation. Maybe there was some kind of accident. It's a dangerous environment up there. His voice trailed off, and I could tell that he didn't want to say out loud what we were both thinking. That my sister was missing, presumed dead. He didn't seem to have anything else to say, so I thanked him and told him that I had work to be getting on with. He told me that he was sorry and that if he received any further word, he'd be sure to let me know. I stood in the front room and listened to the sound of his car driving away, until there was only the silence once more and I was alone with my thoughts. A lot of questions were bubbling up inside all of me at once. Why did she put me down as her next of kin? Did it mean that she wanted me to be a part of her life after all? And did that matter anyway if she was gone? As this last question rose and fell away inside me, I put my head in my hands, and I made a decision. I couldn't. I wouldn't accept that my sister was dead, so I would go to northern Alaska and look for her. With a sense of urgency pulsing through me, I loaded up my truck. The last thing that I got was my mobile phone. I hadn't used it for a long time because I had no signal where I lived, but I figured I needed it then. I turned it on and put it in the passenger seat and then set off. I drove towards town, glancing at regular intervals at the mobile. I was a mile out from the center of town when the bars appeared. I pulled over, opened up the browser, and typed in the name of the university where she worked. Moments later, I was on its homepage. After following a bunch of links, I ended up in the news section. There was a bland, self-promotional story announcing the archaeological dig that my sister was a part of. In the circumstances, it should have been removed, but I guess, like most big organizations, the university's left hand wasn't talking to its right hand and the story was still there. It was dated 3 months before and detailed how a team from the university's archaeological department would be surveying a long-abandoned mining settlement of historical interest. I had always thought that archaeologists only ever dug up sites that were thousands of years old, but according to the website, this project was focused on a settlement that had sprung up around 70 years ago. The site was said to have been left undisturbed and could help add important details to the understanding of an industry which had played such a key role in the region. All of which would have been just dandy had the people carrying out the work there not seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. These supplementary information at the end of the story included a map. It wasn't detailed enough to lead me to the old mining settlement directly, but did show a town that was relatively nearby. That I knew was where I needed to head first. Next, I checked out flights as that should have been the quickest way to get to the area, but that proved to not be the case. I would need to wait 3 days into the next scheduled flight to the nearest regional airport, and then either charter a small plane or hire a car. Waiting for anything was out of the question with the mood that I was in. I decided that I would get there under my own steam in my own vehicle. I restarted the engine, turned away from town, and floored the accelerator. I drove non-stop for hour after hour. I knew that I should have stopped and rested up, but I was possessed. Nothing else mattered now but for me to get there and find my sister. When night fell, I felt as though I was moving through an endless darkness. There was no horizon, just the strip of road ahead of me caught in the headlights. Now and then I caught glimpses of lights in the far distance, the bright clusters of industrial plants shining like constellations on the edge of sight. Hours would pass without me seeing a single other vehicle. Just before dawn, I was looking at the road but not really seeing anything. I was feeling hazy and thinking about my sister and our parents, our home, when an 18-wheeler suddenly appeared. It towered over me, its horn was screaming, and its lights were blinding me. It was about to hit me. There was no time to brake. I pulled the steering wheel to the right as hard as I could, and I felt the force of the other vehicle pass by me like a storm. My truck shook and rattled as it careened off the tarmac onto dirt and rock. I braked and veered to a halt and then sat there breathing raggedly, blinking, wondering how I had not seen it coming. I figured that I must have been falling asleep at the wheel and drifting into the other lane. If we had collided, I would have been crushed. I wiped cold sweat from my brow and drove a little further away from the road, then turned the engine off and closed my eyes. I could not help my sister if I was dead. I needed to sleep. I woke with a start a few hours later. A fragment of a nightmare remained in my mind's eye for a moment. I was parachuting into hostile territory, and the ground was opening up below me. The crevice was lined with sharp teeth. I rubbed my face. It was another foul dream, and I needed to forget about it. I made coffee and a flavorless powdered stew on the small camper stove that I brought with me. Topped this off with a couple of energy bars and then got going again. As the miles continued to pass, I lost track of time. There was only the road ahead. When finally, I saw a sign with the name of the town that I was looking for. A tired smile that crossed my face. I was one step closer to finding my sister. It was dusk. The road grew narrower as I approached the town. There were no streetlights alongside the road, but I could see the glow of lights and buildings ahead as night fell. Shadows reached out from squat wooden structures that lined what seemed to be the town's main street. Its only street, perhaps. I could just make out the goods in the window of a convenience store. It looked as if it was already closed for the night. On the other side of the road, the lights were going out in another store. A silhouette inside pulled down a shutter over the door. Next door, there was a light on in a building announcing itself as a mortician's. Death must be a 24-hour business around here, I thought with a wiry grin, and drove on slowly down the street. Towards the end of the strip on the left, there was one building which looked very much open. Light bled from its windows into the street, and as I parked up and killed the engine, I could hear music as well as the sound of raised voices drifting out. I climbed from my truck, stretched my aching limbs, and looked at the sign daubed on the window in white paint. It read, Jed's Bar. Underneath was scrawled, Rest your weary bones and take a drink. At that moment in time, that sounded mighty good to me, so I headed on inside. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and tobacco. I was pretty ripe after long days on the road, but as I stood just inside the doorway, there was no mistaking the stench of stale sweat that also filled the place. I looked around. There were a row of round wooden tables with chairs pulled up around them, a jukebox playing a song about being lonesome in the night, and a long bar area running the length of one wall. The patrons of the bar were gathered there, hunched over glasses and looking my way. A dozen pairs of bloodshot eyes in all. I guessed that they must not have gotten many strangers calling in for a drink at Jed's Bar, but I didn't feel intimidated by the intention. I nodded and said, I hope you're all well this fine evening. And then I headed for the bar. There were no women patronizing the bar that particular night, and I doubted the men there had loving better halves waiting at home. Their clothes looked what I would have called lived in. The stubble on their chins was gray and their cheeks were explosions of broken veins. The man standing behind the bar who was watching me as well as I approached was equally disheveled. He was wiping the inside of a tankard with a filthy cloth. I made a mental note to take my drink directly from a bottle and settled into an empty seat. I ordered a beer. There was a handwritten sign on a chalkboard behind the bar saying, "No credit cards, no tabs." I placed a note on the bar and then turned to my neighbor and smiled and told him that I was looking for the old mining settlement and would be mighty grateful if he or one of the other gentlemen in the bar could give me directions. Well, once I had said my piece, it was as if somebody had flicked a switch. The atmosphere in the bar went from wary suspicion of a stranger to downright cold. I had no idea what I had done wrong, and I turned to the barman. He was scowling at me and pretty much slammed the open bottle of beer down onto the bar in front of me, then said in a hoarse and slurred voice, "Dang, mister, you don't want to go to that place. There's a badness out there waiting in the darkness. It drove the miners to abandon the settlement, and it hasn't lost its appetite since. We told the other strangers that. We told them to stay away, but they would not listen." He shook his head and went back to wiping a glass with a filthy cloth. None of the men at the bar were looking at me now. It felt like they were averting their gaze. They wanted nothing to do with me. In a quiet voice I said, "My little sister was one of those strangers, and I'm here to find her and bring her home if I can. If one of you want to help me do that, I'll be grateful. If not, I'll wish you a good night and be on my way." I caught glances between the barman and the men at the bar. I figured they were trying to decide what to do. After a few long minutes, the barman went into a back room and returned carrying a map. It was old and faded and torn to pieces. He opened it up and put it on the bar, and then he placed a nicotine-stained finger on a point on the map. He said nothing. None of them did, and they didn't need to. I looked to where the old mining settlement was located, and thanks to my years of army training, I memorized the map. And then I nodded at the barman and left. The doors closed behind me. I stood and breathed in the night air. It was cold and clear. I started up the engine and set off in the direction the map had shown. I had my headlights on full beam. They picked out a dirt track with trees starting to rise around it. I trusted my sense of direction and the guidance offered by these stars, and I knew that I could reach my destination. I hadn't been driving for long though when the route that I was on started to become impassable for my truck. I tried forcing my way through a little further, but the sounds of the scraping and cracking coming from below the truck made me stop. Damaging the truck beyond repair was something that I needed to avoid. I reckoned it was another 3 hours on foot to the mining settlement. That would have been a breeze back in my special forces days, but I was nowhere near that level of fitness now. But I was still in good shape and I was determined. I grabbed a backpack, filled it with enough supplies to keep me going for 24 hours, put on a headband with a flashlight attached, and set off on foot. I wanted to run, but even with the flashlight cutting swaths through the darkness, the danger of snagging my foot in the undergrowth was too risky, so instead I walked as quick as I could. To help ensure that I could find my way back to the truck, I marked trees at regular intervals. I was light on my feet, but to the creatures living there, I must have sounded like a clumsy juggernaut. All around me there were frequent sudden rustles of movement, and animals and birds crying out. As the miles passed, I began to gasp for breath. The cold air burnt the back of my throat and I began to feel sharp pains spreading through my chest. I powered on, focusing on the next step, and then the next. Every one I took brought me closer to finding my sister. My sense of time slipped and I couldn't say if there was 3 hours or longer when a break appeared ahead of me. I raced towards it and found myself in a clearing. The first light of dawn was creeping through the sky. I turned off the flashlight. In the gloom, the remains of old timber huts stood scattered around. Time and nature had broken in roofs and rotted away walls, but these were clearly still places where the miners must have lived. The huts were laid out alongside a crude grid and there was the remnants of a street sign. On one of the points, somebody had carved New York that-a-way. As I looked around, the place felt more like the ghost of a small town than a temporary settlement. Maybe the miners had been planning on staying here. I wondered as I moved forwards, making my way past the huts. Through the openings, I could see that there were still chairs and some of the remains of tables. Looking out over the entire settlement, I could make out the shell of a larger building towards its center. Maybe it had been a meeting place for business, or a chapel, or a bar. Its ramshackle frame could have housed more than 24 people easily, I figured. And then I came up alongside it and my nerves began to tingle. Through the gaping wound of a decayed window frame, I could see 3 large tents pitched inside. They were modern, high-quality kit, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this is where my sister and the rest of the archaeological team had been staying. I walked through one of the jagged gaps in the frame of the building and over to the tents. There was no sound coming from inside the tents and no sign of movement, and I was not expecting to find anybody inside them. The search and rescue team would have presumably looked inside the tents while they were doing their sweep of the area and found nothing. But I needed to see inside the tents with my own eyes anyway. There could be a clue in there as to where the missing people had gone. I approached the nearest tent. Its front lay open and there was no external sign of damage. I looked inside cautiously in case any local wildlife had wandered in. Startling something with claws was always a bad idea. There were no animals inside though. The tent was just about tall enough to stand up inside, and there was a long trestle table set up in the middle. Various objects rested on the table. There was a clay pipe that looked darkened by age. There was a small knife that still looked sharp despite the obvious signs that it had been many years since the blade had been used to cut anything. There was a single shoe and a plate with a crack running down one side. All in all, there were dozens of what I would describe as everyday items that must have been collected as part of the archaeological investigation of the site. At the far end of the trestle table, there was a closed laptop and a paper notebook. I opened the laptop and it flickered on. The logo of the university appeared on screen along with a box asking for a password. I turned to the notebook. In page after page of careful handwriting, it detailed objects that I recognized from the table. There were sketches alongside dimensions and notes of locations where each object had been found. It was nerdy to the 9th degree and I imagined my sister loving it. I smiled sadly to myself and went to check out the other tents. The first one was clearly where people bunkered down. It was filled with a tangle of sleeping bags and clothes, wash bags, and bug repellent. I found a couple of wallets as well with IDs in them. Both were men in their early 20s. They must have been students, I guessed, on what must have felt like the adventure of a lifetime. Until what? I was still no closer to finding out. I shook my head and backed out of the tent and entered the last one. From the clothing scattered about, this looked to have been where the women slept, Now was not the time to worry about invading personal space, so I rooted through their belongings, even shaking out sleeping bags in my mounting frustration. In the last sleeping bag that I lifted up, I could feel something still inside it. I reached in and took out a slim paper notebook. A cold chill traveled over my skin. Even before I opened the notebook, I thought that I knew what it was. I turned to the first page, and by the daylight streaming through the sides of the tent, I began to read my sister's journal. The entries began as she prepared to leave for this expedition. Through the details of double-checking equipment and finalizing travel plans, her excitement shone through. She was going to lead the expedition, which was a first for her and clearly a proud achievement. At one point, she wrote, "I wish so much that I could pick up the phone and call Mom and Dad and tell them all about this." There was no mention of me. The journal went on to record the journey to northern Alaska, the long hike to get to the settlement carrying their gear and then setting up the camp, and the buzz of the early excavation work. I read this through a blur of tears. I hadn't cried since I was a child. Despite all the pain of my military service and its aftermath, I had kept the tears inside. Sitting in that tent with my sister's journal open on my knee, there was no holding back. The journal ended with an entry about settling down to a good night's sleep. There was nothing about any threat or concerns for her safety or for the students with her. I closed the journal. I felt drained. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I pulled the sleeping bag over me and lay down. Something growled close by. I opened my eyes. My heart was beating fast and it was dark inside the tent. Night had fallen. I breathed out. I must have slept for hours and the growl was part of another nightmare. I told myself that it was fine. But then I heard another growl. I froze. The sound had come from right outside of the tent. I looked over at the entrance. I hadn't closed it, so whatever was out there had the red carpet pretty much laid out for it to walk on in if he wanted. My mind began to race through possibilities. It hadn't sounded like a bear. Maybe it was a wolf. And one that was hungry enough to come hunting for a human. The growl outside sounded again, a low and harsh rumble, like a storm building before it breaks. I was armed, not because I had come to this place expecting violence, but because it was practical to carry in a landscape such as this. I unclipped the holster and drew nice and slow. I wanted to give whatever was out there the shock of its life. I aimed at the open entrance and fired, and then listened. Apart from my ragged breathing, there was silence. I sat up and then crawled out of the tent. I was relieved to see that there was no wild animal in sight, not only because it meant that I had succeeded in scaring it off, but also because I had not wanted to harm a creature acting naturally in its own home territory. I was the intruder here after all, and as long as I didn't end up as dinner, I figured the two of us could get along at a distance real fine. I did not reholster in case the animal decided to try again and collected twigs one-handed to make a fire. Now the initial danger had passed and I was starting to feel the bitter cold of the night. Once the flames were crackling, I sat as close to them as I could without getting singed. I still fell down after reading my sister's journal, but I was more determined than ever to find her. One wolf, it had been a wolf. It would have not been enough to take and kill a group of adults, which meant that there was still a mystery here. And where there was a mystery, there was hope. I decided that in the morning, I would begin to methodically survey the surrounding area of the settlement. I would work my way outwards, looking for signs of broken foliage or tracks, from people or otherwise that could give me a lead. In the meantime, the best that I could do was remain vigilant in case my wild neighbor returned, and brew up some coffee. 20 minutes or so later, I was sipping my second cup of coffee when I heard a rustle nearby. I put the cup down gently and quietly as I could, and I focused in on the sound. It had come from almost straight ahead of me. And there it was again, the sound of something moving close by but out of sight. I pointed the flashlight, and through the gaps in the frame of the building saw the dark shapes of huts, and something darker still padding between them. I got to my feet and slipped the safety catch off. My heart was a jackhammer inside me as I stared out and saw a pair of eyes. They were red, and so vivid and bright it was as if they were two scarlet flames in the night. And then I saw the tips of fangs and a snout as a monster began to move towards me. It was a wolf, but made grotesquely large. Its pelt was gray and matted. Its stride was slow and deliberate. My guts, as much as my eyes, told me this was an intelligent creature and a vicious one. Lines of drool hung from its fangs as its jaw opened a little. A low growl drifted towards me, and I could see it tensing and getting ready to leap. I did not move. "Hold it," I told myself. "Hold it." And then the creature exploded forwards. Its claws were extended, its jaws wide open. I raised my weapon and fired. The creature threw its head up and toweled and then fell to the ground. It writhed around, thrashing in a frenzy of pain. I could see blood rushing from inside its mouth where I had wounded it. I felt no sense of triumph or relief because the mystery of my sister's disappearance had been explained. A creature of this size could have taken her and the students. Years ago, one of this thing's ancestors could have also killed some of the miners in the settlement and scared the rest of them away. Scholars and miners would have been no match for it. But X Special Forces was a different ballgame altogether. I kept the barrel pointed at the creature. I felt nauseous as I looked at the thing's fangs and wondered if they had been the last thing my sister had seen. My finger twitched. I was going to make sure that it never killed again. Only suddenly, it turned its head to face me. Its eyes burnt into me. It got to its feet, it snarled, and it threw itself at me. I ducked and rolled away. A line of pain shot along my arm. Gasping, now sprawled out on the ground, I looked at my arm. A wide gash ran the length of my forearm, where the creature must have caught me with its claws. And now it was behind me, snarling, ready to attack once more. I took a deep breath. Thankfully, I held the weapon on my uninjured side. I threw myself onto my back, extended my arm, and aimed for the creature's eye. A second later, a primal scream cut through the night. My aim had been true. I had still not put the creature down for good, though. It reared away and began to run back through the settlement. I followed as it sped past the huts and then into the undergrowth beyond. It was time to finish it, to end its filthy life. My flashlight revealed a trail of blood in the creature's wake. It was crashing onward, but there would be no escape. I raced on until I saw ahead of me the creature slow down and then collapse. I slowed as well and circled it. It was lying on the ground, breathing heavily. As I came closer, it looked up at me with its remaining eye. The fire there was dimming. And then the eye closed. It was over. I began to turn away, and then I saw something just past where the creature lay that stopped me in my tracks. I moved towards the thing that I had seen, desperately hoping that I was mistaken, but there was no mistake. A human skull glinted pale and terrible in the beam of my flashlight, and just beyond it there was a second skull. Lying at an angle to this was a spine and a ribcage. I took another few steps forward, and everywhere that I looked, I could see more skeletal remains. Some looked very old, others seemed more recent. I noticed a sliver of flesh still attached to one femur. I had seen things that no person should have to see in the theater of war, but this was more than I could take, because I knew these were the victims of the creature and that my sister would be among them. I fell to my knees and wept. I had failed her, and I wanted to lay down among the dead and never move. I knelt there, racked with guilt and sorrow through the rest of that longest night. At dawn, I forced myself to my feet. The least I could do was give these people as decent as a burial as they could. But where to begin? I was trying to decide when my world was turned upside down once again. In the morning light, something had moved just beyond where the bones lay. I looked closer and I saw a hand. The fingers were twitching, and I could see a tangle of hair as well. By all it was incredible that there was still somebody alive. I scrambled forwards and my heart leapt. It was my sister. She was covered in dirt and dried blood and barely conscious. I checked her pulse and it was weak but steady. "Hold on there," I said to her. "I'm going to get you out of here." I don't know if she heard me, but that didn't matter at that moment. All that did was that somehow she had survived and I needed to get her to a place of safety. I lifted her up as gently as I could and set off walking. We passed the creature's body. Rot in Hades, I thought as I looked away from it for the last time. I carried her through the old settlement and on. The relief of finding her gave me the strength to move swiftly and surely. My markings were clear and easy to follow. Every now and then I would speak to her. I said things like, "Remember that time the police brought me home? Boy, were Mom and Dad mad." She didn't respond to anything I said, but I kept talking to her. Kept holding her tight as we neared the truck, and finally reached it. I placed her carefully in the passenger seat and then went round to the driver's side and got behind the wheel. I turned the key. The engine did not start. I tapped the dashboard and asked the truck to be kind to me and then tried again, but still nothing. A third time lucky, I thought. But then I heard a growl. I looked up and fear gripped me. The creature was 6 feet away from the truck. It raised its head slowly and bared its hideous teeth. They were stained dark with its own dried blood. More crimson stains marked its gray pelt below its destroyed eye, as if it had been weeping blood. How was it still alive? I didn't know. This thing that was an aberration in the natural world. It growled again. I tore my gaze away from it. We needed to get away from there. It had been a long time since I had asked a higher power for help, but I did then. I turned the key and finally the engine kicked into life. As it did, the creature leapt. The truck lurched forwards and the creature crashed into the windscreen, which cracked and then gave way. Suddenly, there were claws inside the truck, inches away from my face, trying to slash at me, and a muzzle and blood-stained fangs slick with drool. I threw myself to the side onto my sister, covering her and trying to protect her. When I did, the creature pulled back for a moment. It was gearing up for a new attack, I figured, which gave me a few seconds to act. I reached out with one hand and I grabbed the wheel. twisted my leg so that I could press down onto the pedal, and I went for it. I floored the pedal and the car rushed forwards. The creature was still on the front hood, a dark, crazed mass blocking my vision. "No hangers on," I muttered under my breath and slammed on the brake. The creature toppled backwards onto the ground. I raced forwards again, using the truck like a weapon now. Sickening sounds filled the vehicle as it hit the creature. I tried to reverse away so that I could attack it again, but the truck was wrecked and juddered to a halt. I reached over my sister and opened the door and maneuvered us both out. I laid her very gently on the ground and then looked over at the creature. From the angle of its head, I knew that it would not be coming back from this. It was finally dead. Game over. I knelt by my sister and wept. I didn't notice her raise her hand until her fingers had brushed my cheek. I looked down at her face. Her eyes were open. "Hey," I said. "Hey." Her reply was hoarse and she began to cough. "It's okay," I said. "That thing's dead and you're safe now. I'm gonna get you to town and then we can get the help you need." She grimaced as a spasm of pain had passed through her, and then she said, "No, you have to keep me away from the other people." "I don't understand," I told her. She looked at me and said, "It wanted me to be its bride. It changed me with a bite and now I'm not human anymore." Her gaze drifted to the body of the creature. I looked over as well and felt a jolt of shock pass through me. It was no longer the corpse of a monstrous creature lying on the ground. It was the corpse of a man. My sister's fingers once again touched my face and she guided me to look at her. He was a shapeshifter, and now so am I. Our journey home was long and difficult. I carried her back to the town and then stole a car, and when that ran out of petrol, I stole another. I parked in shadows when I went to buy food from roadside diners. My sister slept most of the time. I slept only when I had to. At last, we pulled up outside my cabin. I helped her out of the car and supported her inside. 2 days later, she changed before my eyes for the first time. She became the creature for a few hours and then turned back into a person. That was 6 months ago, and she has changed again many times. The change emerges without warning. The young, shy, bright woman once more becomes the creature for hours, sometimes even days at a time. It holds back from attacking me because it recognizes me. Even so, we made the decision that while she was in her altered state, she should be kept hidden in a secure place. I reinforced and soundproofed a room in the cabin with steel and padlocks to be her cage. This breaks my heart, but until we find a way that she can control the darkness inside of her, what other choice is there? If anybody else encountered her, they would see a monster that had to be destroyed. I see my little sister, and I will always be there for her.